Well, folks, tonight, I'm going on the Fantasy Network to talk to Jimmy Nuts, host of Chatting with Nuts. And let me tell you something. Jimmy Nuts, I got one question for you. What you gonna do when the wheels of BellTube Mania run wild all over you?
Yes, sirree, Bob. We are back with another episode of Chatting with Nuts, number 72, in fact. As long as I didn't misnumber it, which could have happened. But I woke up today, and on my very, very random occasion when I checked Twitter, I see this promo from this person with long, beautiful hair, some guns, and a cutoff. And I was delighted by this, and that is because my guest put a lot of promotion behind this appearance, which I always appreciate, and that is, of course, Brian from BellTube. How you doing, man?
I'm doing awesome, man. How are you tonight?
Actually, I'm feeling pretty good. I did not have the greatest week ever, but it's over, and that feels good. Sometimes you got to just run into the weekend full steam ahead, and that's what we're doing here tonight. But I did want to say I love the promo,
awesome,
and I also very much appreciated it. It got me even more excited than I already was to have you on the show. But it's always cool when someone shows some excitement, right?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, normally when I'm watching the Friday Night Delight, I'm just sitting on my couch, got my laptop on. I'm wearing like a white tank top with a hole in one side and a big Cheeto stand on the other side. So this is great. I get to dress up and fly off the internet cliff with you. I'm excited.
Yeah, man. I also always have Dorito stains on my shorts. You just can't see them. It's the food of gods.
Awesome.
I know you said Cheetos. I'm more of a Dorito guy, especially the 3D Ranch. Those were bangers.
Wow.
Yeah, that's a throwback.
Okay. Well, no, okay. But we're still representing the Frito-Lay company, which, by the way, if they would like to sponsor either one of us, you know how to find us. The good people at Frito-Lay.
I had one sponsor ever I was super excited about, and I did the ad read at the beginning of Chatting with Nuts, and then they emailed me and said, we got absolutely zero engagement from your ad. We would not like to sponsor any more videos. And I said, that sucks.
That does suck.
Hey, you can't, if it didn't resonate with the people, it is what it is, right? Like,
no, what was the product?
It was actually Whatnot, the online, and I took the sponsorship because I like the platform. It's like it's like this, but it's like it's live auctioning. So think eBay, but with a live stream.
Okay.
And they have some really good book collectors on there. So our friend Library Ladder, everyone knows him and his amazing voice. He has hosted a couple different auctions on there, and we're talking about books that are worth a lot of money going for very little money. Like really cool stuff. Yeah. And I actually was able to pick up some signed Glenn Cook Black Company books off of Whatnot for like $8 a piece.
Very cool.
Like original mass market paperbacks. And I love the mass market paperbacks for Black Company.
Do they still exist? I mean, this
platform? Yeah, they're booming actually.
I've never heard of it.
Yeah, it's the app is pretty decent, and they have a lot of backing, like big money behind them.
Wow.
So, yeah, I'm giving them an ad for free right now.
I still think they should look at this Jimmy Nuts sponsorship thing. I mean, if they're doing well now, they could be doing, a little bit better probably. So,
well, Derry says that they won't let me sell out. We're trying to keep it free.
I'm so new, literally, I'll do whatever. So sure.
I'll tell you what, my favorite ad I've ever done is over on the Bend the Knee podcast, where we talk about A Song of Ice and Fire. We get a lot of ads for that because it does pretty well in the audio downloads. And my favorite one was for hymns, which is like, male health and enhancement and all these things. And I just got to open up with the best line of all time, which was, in Westeros, you got to keep your sword sharp in the battlefield and the bedroom. And then we just riffed about Theon Greyjoy for like 6 minutes. It was amazing.
That would make sense. He had
they never called us again.
No. Well, Theon had an unfortunate turn of events in his walk through life. So yeah, I can see that.
We thought it was a banger, but unfortunately, they never called us back after that one. Strangely enough, the audience on Bend the Knee, I think, is largely female, actually, which as is my channel actually as well. So
really,
yeah, I guess I'm in tune with my feminine side, I guess.
Excellent.
Yeah. Have you ever looked at your breakdown?
I have.
And
opposite.
I'm not shocked.
It's like 20. I'm going to say it's like 75-25, maybe.
That's pretty good. I know a lot of people with 90-10.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. What's your age bracket?
It's between 25 and 54 is, I think,
Okay.
because it separates it like 25 to 35. And then I think whatever, the numbers are all pretty equal in that range. So it's like a 20%, 20%, 20%. I am crushing it in the over 80 demographic, which is, I think they have me on at nursing homes across America.
Like, we got to get these people to sleep. Turn on BellTube. No.
Absolutely. Whatever it is. I mean, a viewer's a viewer, no matter how the heart is beating, so long as it's beating,
Yeah, exactly.
semi-regularly, it's good.
Hey, a view is a view is a view, my friend.
That's right. That is right.
Beesney says, I'm 100% for the sellout phase. Where's Raid Shadow Legends at? Tell me to buy a purple mattress. I'm a big Tuft & Needle fan myself, actually. That's the mattress that I've been championing for many years.
Is that an online one?
It is. It's like an online in a box, and I'll never forget opening up that mattress when we first moved to our new place, and my father-in-law staring at it and going, "You bought a mattress that comes in a box?" And I was like, "Bro, trust me." And he was just like, "This is so stupid." And then he laid on it. And he was like, "This is pretty nice. How much was this?" And it was like a fraction of what something like a Tempur-Pedic would have cost.
Yep.
I'm just giving out ads tonight. Like, I'm just giving everybody the rub. I don't know what I'm doing.
It's probably me. I bring out the salespeople and some people, so could be that.
I can see that. I feel like you're a pretty decent brand ambassador. I know you have your own product going on. So
I do.
Why don't we plug that early now while we have people tuning in and tell us about your
We sure could. They're over there, so I'm not going to get up and trip over my headphone cord again. But the company is called Bell Packaging, and the product is called Bell Flask. All one word. If you go to bellflask.com, it is a flexible, non-metal flask. It holds 15 to 16 ounces of your favorite beverage. It could be water. It could be an adult beverage. It doesn't really matter. The cool part is that it will never set off a metal detector anywhere. So you can go to a festival, a sporting event, anywhere, you're getting right through that metal detector, which is fantastic. It's got clear sides with measurement lines, so you know how much is in there at all times. Never changes the taste of the product within, so you could have nice scotch, nice wine. Can actually put about 2/3 of a bottle of wine in one and take it to the movie theater. So, yeah, comes in like 5 different designs. It's a lot of fun. We sell them right on our website, and it directs to Amazon. So I am very familiar with the Amazon platform because I live my business life over there.
Yeah. Well, I checked it out, and it seems like you're doing very well. Like, it seems like people enjoy it whenever they get it. So kudos to you. When did you start, or when did you even have the idea to do something like this?
So before I started BellTube, and I was in the bar business, and before that I was in the packaging business. So I kind of combined the two things that I knew something about, which was flexible packaging and booze, and did this about 6.5-ish years ago. And there's 3 patents on the product. We just applied for a 4th patent, which I hope comes through in the next year or so. So about 6-7 years. It's been going really good. We're pretty consistently in the top 20 drinking flasks in North America on Amazon, which includes Stanley and everything else. So,
oh, wow.
Yeah.
People seem to like those, from what I understand.
It's really bizarre because Stanley's now did a deal with Amazon. So when you buy one, they are coming direct from Amazon. They're basically a partner to them, which means that they're pushing out all the Stanley Flask emails out to their entire database. So if you go on and check out Bell Flask, you can probably count on getting an email from Amazon pushing a Stanley Flask your way, because now they're partnered with them and they know you've been to my page on their platform. It's pretty backwards.
Yeah, it's pretty brutal. I'm not gonna lie. That seems scummy is the word I'd probably use.
Well, it's the right word. And, I've had people complain to me about YouTube, but I've always told them, I said, look, nobody from YouTube is coming up with talking about the fantasy genre that I like and putting me up against an Amazon corporate employee and, promoting the crap out of it. It's a different animal altogether, but Amazon is, Amazon will do what they do.
Yeah, they sure will, without a doubt.
And I was watching one of your episodes earlier, and I think you were talking about Goodreads, and they're owned by Amazon, and there's a reason that Goodreads is as dysfunctional as it is, because after spending as many years as I have working with Amazon, the left hand absolutely has no idea what the right hand is doing. And I've come to believe it is intentional. There's people in management that just, they don't even want their own people to know how it works. So I don't know.
Also, when something's that big, it is extremely difficult. Scaling is something people try to prepare for, but it's always very difficult. We face all the time in software. And this is from Cabo Wabo, one of my favorite Mexican spots on the Las Vegas Strip, which I believe is closing down. Which, to be honest, last time I went there, it kind of sucked. So it is what it is. That was the first place I ever had a smoky margarita, and I fell in love with it. It was wonderful.
Did they do that with the Sammy Hagar deal, or is that
no,
part of that? No,
it was some like imported tequila. I don't know. It was wild. It was wild. I really, and I'm not a big drinker. I really enjoyed it. So I got the glass that it was in. This thing's pretty old at this point, and also the logo was starting to wear off. Another ad. I can't stop selling. I can't stop
telling you. It's my sales management background.
Yeah. You've worn a lot of hats in your life, and I got to chat with you whenever we were on Matt on Bookstream, which was a really good time getting to, talk to you for the first time. It's actually the first time I had talked to Matt on Books in person, live, actually, which is funny because I've known him for 3 or 4 years and watched his videos. I'm like, oh yeah, never been on stream with him. But, hearing your background and everything that you've done in your life, it resonates with me because I've worn a lot of hats and I've done a lot of different things, and I'm never afraid to fall flat on my face, which I get the vibe that's probably how you live as well. So the question has to be asked, and Ryan asked it. He said, Brian, after your tweet today, how do you have so many costumes, and what were their origins? Is this from your nightclub days? Is this for promotionals, for flat? Like where did you get the wig, dude?
Okay. So it's a great question. And the party that I was probably most known for in the bar business was Halloween. So of course you're always going to be busy on St. Patrick's Day. You're always going to be busy on New Year's, but I just love Halloween. And our building that our club was in is about 125 years old. So it's got all the huge ceilings and it's all brick, and it's basically makes the perfect haunted house. So I really got into throwing Halloween parties every year. Well, that's a great thing, but you also don't want to come as the same person year after year after year. And so I would buy these costumes. And sooner or later, you do this for 15 or 16 years, you have acquired a lot of costume stuff. So that's pretty much where most of the origin of that came from. I will say I'm very disappointed in Amazon because, as we were just talking about, I tried to get an accessory for tonight, and they couldn't get it here on time, but I had a feather boa ready for you when I was doing the wrestling.
I was kind of wondering what I was going to be because I wore my bar shirt. I wore my nightclub shirt. Not that I attend them anymore, but if I did, I would probably wear this fresh off the rack at Target.
I love it. Hey, it looks good to me. You'd fit right into where I had a place, so you'd look good.
And we're both showing a little hamburger too, which I appreciate. I mean, I think we're both styling tonight.
I think we look good.
I agree. I mean, I'm a big fan of me, honestly.
You too? I mean, I knew we had a lot in common, but mirror gazing, I never knew would be one of them.
I actually have a mirror right over here, and I just look, and I'm like, man, my legs look great in this chair. Is that?
It's incredible.
Yeah.
I think we need a leg cam.
The feet cam, I know the degenerates in my audience would love that. No. So, I mean, you were in the bar business, and obviously have your own business and stuff, but you're a booktuber and you're a reader, and you seem like you've been very passionate about it for a long time. What made you want to start on this journey on BookTube? Like, what made you want to do this?
I think it was a little similar to the answer that John from Talking Story gave, in that you get to a certain age in life and you're not meeting brand new people all the time. And when the pandemic happened and my bar closed, that became a real issue for me, because my social life was being in my own nightclub. And every single weekend, there'd be a whole new influx of people for me to meet brand new and talk to. When that went away, it was like, okay, well, now who am I going to talk to? And I found myself in a lot of different, internet chat types of stuff on, different booktubers channels, and started watching Mike a ton. And at the end of the day, I just decided this seems like fun. I think I have the reading resume to be able to do this. I have no idea how video production works. I know something about audio from the bar, but
Mhm.
I can figure this stuff out. And I'd like to be part of the conversation if it feels like the content that I'm making resonates with anybody, which I honestly was not sure if it would or if it would not, because I am a couple of years older than most people that are doing BookTube. So I said, well, let's give this thing a shot and see how it goes. And yeah, just it really is a great way to meet people of kind of common interests and yet varied lifestyles, very different people that can come around and talk about these fantasy books or these sci-fi books that, frankly, I mean, I noticed Gary in the chat. I'm probably not getting to New Zealand next week. It's pretty awesome to be able to talk to her just like this. So yeah.
Yeah, I think that for me, that's kind of the case as well. I've actually learned a lot because me and you are both living here in America, and sometimes we don't understand how the rest of the world works. At least I don't. And from communicating with people who live in other places, and having that common ground of books has really led to me learning a ton about things. And I'm hoping I'd love to do a world tour and meet all these wonderful people that I've been talking to for, 4 or 5 years now, it seems like. So I think your story is very similar to a lot of people's, though, especially about the pandemic, trying to find other ways of socializing, and then finding a group and getting a base, and then going from there and saying, you know what, I have a lot to say, and I kind of need to turn on a camera and start yelling into it.
Yeah. And, for me, I felt like there was space in this corner of BookTube for me because I didn't see anybody doing what I would do. So it wasn't like I know that there's people that are going to give more in-depth analysis at a more academic level of this literature that we're reading. I know there's people, that are going to be more organized when it comes to charting out their points and really give a detailed synopsis and breakdown and an analysis. There's people that are better than that, better than I am at that. But I don't know a whole lot of people that'll throw on a disco wig, put on a disco soundtrack, have some smoke going on in the background, and start, dancing in front of a camera while they hold up Piranesi. So, and in business, we call this an unmet need of a market. Let's see if there's
The disco market, yes.
there was a gaping hole in the disco market on BookTube. I saw myself being able to fill it. So I don't know. I just thought that if I was going to do this, I could do it in a way that probably is unique to my background, unique to how I operate, and see if people like it or not. So far, so good. I mean, I've only really been at this for just like 4 months.
Yeah, and you've grown fairly quickly. I do think it's an interesting point that you bring up, that you have been reading for a long time, but there's this maybe a little caution where you're like, well, I'm a little bit older than maybe some of the people that are making content here. But the more I explore different places on YouTube for books, there's a lot of people, that are a little bit older than I am. And I find that a lot of them have a lot of great things to say and to add to the conversation. Obviously, Library Ladder is a wealth of knowledge, and I've learned a lot about history behind things, of why
Sure.
certain books were published when they were or when they weren't. And there's always stuff that we miss as readers, and especially trying to go back through the ages, things are out of publication. And I always appreciate hearing how people kind of, got into reading a while back, like before I did. One thing that I really like about you is that you do not seem to be a bitter reader. And what I mean by that is it seems like you're willing to try new things and accept them and give them their fair shot, rather than just saying everything that I read back then is so much better than everything now. I feel like you give a pretty fair shot. Like, you read lit RPGs, which
Tons of it.
I was
Tons of it.
shocked. I was shocked by this, honestly.
Yeah.
What made you start reading lit RPGs?
I'm trying to remember the specific book. I think it was The Land by a guy named Dr. Alaron Kong, who's actually a medical doctor down in Atlanta. And he was a gamer, and he decided to write this book called The Land Founding. And I read it and I thought it was kind of cool. I'm a video gamer, at heart. I had an Atari 2600 when the Atari 2600 came out. So, and all the different generations of everything since then. So the idea of game lit was kind of cool to me because it combined a couple of passions that I have. And I have sifted through enough awful lit RPG to give myself a little bit of a, not, I don't know if the word is expert is the right word, but certainly I've gone through enough of it to be able to sort out what I would recommend and would likely be acceptable to other people than just drivel and people writing at home that really shouldn't, pick up a piece of paper and write anything. But I don't know, game lit is just a lot of fun for me.
Mm.
And in the genre of lit RPG, there's a few different genres that I like, and there's the one that I don't particularly care for, which is probably the biggest seller of all of them, which is Cradle by Will White. I'm not sure if you've heard of that one or if you've even
I
have you
have
read that one.
that's the one that I feel like everybody talks about, and I actually own at least the first 7 or 8 because he gives them away for free a lot, or at least he used to.
Yeah,
I'm sure he doesn't need to anymore. So that qualifies as lit RPG then.
it sort of does. I mean, it's going to qualify into the big umbrella of lit RPG, but it's really on the cultivation side more
Okay.
than the progression side or the game literature side. It's kind the best way that I can describe cultivation is almost like reading a manga. And it's just different. The source of one's abilities and power-ups and things of that nature tend to come from things like meditation and really thinking about your place in the universe and cultivating your own personal energies and growing super because of it. It doesn't translate for me as well as a traditional Western RPG does into lit RPG or game lit or
Mhm.
progression fantasy for me. But yeah, it's weird. I want to go back to what you had asked about being a bitter reader and disqualifying, certain things as better than others. I will read lit RPG. I will give a glowing review of Dungeon Crawler Carl. And the next afternoon, I will tell everybody why they need to read Book of the New Sun. So I feel like I can't be looked down on too badly for reading lit RPG, as kind of like if you were going to go to a movie, sometimes you want to see an Oscar winning Oppenheimer. Sometimes you want to go to the Cannes Film Festival and see an amazing foreign film. And
Mm.
sometimes you just want to go see Tom Cruise break into stuff and do Mission Impossible with a giant bucket of popcorn. For me, that's what lit RPG is.
Yeah, and there's nothing wrong with going into it with the right expectations and then experiencing it. There's definitely a decent amount of questions here in the chat, and this one's from JJ is wondering in lit RPG.
Yeah, it is. And that is the glaring hole in my resume of lit RPG. There's two reasons for it. The Wandering Inn is written as a web serial.
Yeah.
And for those of you who may not know what that is, the author uploads chapters at a time to a website just kind of on the fly as it goes. That particular author is very prolific and does not stop writing. And the story is just gigantic. And the reason why I haven't gotten to it at this point is honestly probably because of BookTube. It's the books are so huge that if I decided to read The Wandering Inn, that's going to essentially murder the TBR for quite some time. But it is a glaring gap in my lit RPG reading resume that I'm going to fill. I just don't know how I'm going to do it when that author won't stop writing to give anybody a chance to catch up.
Yeah, I've heard and I don't really know exactly how it works, but I've heard that it's like a Google Doc, and you can actually watch the writer write the
I believe
chapter.
it. I believe it.
I mean, I will say this: that is a very interesting thing to experience as someone that's into it, right? Like, could you
Mhm.
imagine getting to watch one of your favorite authors pen live? I mean, obviously, I would like to see the most edited, refined version of it, of course.
Right.
But it's just kind of growing with the times, taking advantage of a lot of the systems that we have in place, and it's kind of like a natural progression, I think, of online serials. And the thing I like about you and your lit RPG stuff, I've never read it. It's never called to me, to be honest with you. But it seems like what happens with web serials and lit RPGs, and I actually know people who love web serials and they read a lot of them. And Wandering Inn's probably the most popular one
Mhm.
that people talk about,
Yeah.
at least in our sphere, right?
There's that one, and there's He Who Fights with Monsters. Those are really the two big ones for web serials.
And people will do Wandering Inn. They're like, guys, web serials are actually pretty good. And it's like, well, yeah, they've been around for a long time before this, and So it's cool that you actually dove in, read a bunch of lit RPGs, and have actually some sort of like, catalog that you can say, well, I read through these ones. Is there one that you think is your absolute favorite?
Yeah, so I have to go with the default, and it is the BookTube darling right now is Dungeon Crawler Carl. Matt Denneman, I swear to God, has the same sense of humor that I do. And Jeff Hayes and Sound Booth Theater, which is his production company that produces it on Audible, is heads and shoulders above everybody else when it comes to narration. So
Wow.
I have to go with the one that I know it's kind of the internet's baby right now, but Dungeon Crawler Carl would be number one. After that, there's a lot that are probably in second place from that, but I think it's heads and shoulders above them. And I think for a first timer, it's a great one to start with, particularly if you're not opposed to listening on Audible, because that narrator elevates the written material to a whole new level. It's fantastic.
Wow. Yeah, I've heard really, really good things about the audiobook performance. And it does seem like people, even I know people who went into it a little bit with their arms crossed,
Mm-hmm.
come out of it and are like, you know what, actually, I really enjoyed that. So I think that's great. That there's something that people can get excited about, that it's a bit different than anything else, going on that's really popular in this sphere, I should say.
Yeah, and I mean, one thing about lit RPG that people ought to know is that while I describe it sometimes as a popcorn thing, those tend to be the series that I'm drawn to. But I assure you, if you want to get into what they call the crunchy stat side of lit RPG, that it's real data driven and you are talking numbers throughout the whole thing, it's a math experience for the most part. And you can dive as deep as you like into that ocean of material. I tend to be, I don't want to say in the shallow end, but certainly not in the super crunchy end that it would be too difficult to listen to while I'm doing my day stuff with the flask, because that's really how I consume lit RPG, is almost entirely on Audible.
Interesting. Yeah, for me, I almost feel like I would want to see like the figures and stuff. But when you hear such a ringing endorsements about some of these audiobooks, it does make you kind of want to test it out, because audio can definitely enhance an experience. Darren, thank you for the 10 spot. Really appreciate it. He says, this is the fantasy matchup I have been waiting for. Me too. I think,
Awesome.
yeah, I knew pretty quickly that you and I would be able to have a pretty good time if we were unfiltered, live, able to talk for 2 hours. I figured we would have a good time. And part of it is your wide taste in things. Cause I also, I might review a grandmother book, like Poisonwood Bible by Barbara Kingsolver. And then the next day I might, reread The Hobbit.
There you go.
Read some Murakami or whatever else it might be. But Darren, thank you so much for the 10 spot. I really do appreciate it. Now, one of the series that you've finished recently, and I was kind of shocked because I don't hear a lot of people saying bad things about this series. Not that you were trashing or anything, but it's Cradle. Like you said, it's not your favorite. What is it about Cradle? Because I know the first few books some people say are a little bit rough, and then you said that the last one was actually, I think, your favorite, right?
It was the Cradle, the last half of Cradle. Actually, the last book of the 12 books to me read more like most of the lit RPG that I read, because at that point, our main character has, I guess, is the word powered up, or he's achieved his final form, which is really more of a cultivation fantasy type of a thing. But he's as big as he's gonna get, and he's no longer trying to just get to the next level. He's already where he needs to be now that there's different antagonists and the combat ensues, and he's of an ability that he can deal with. There's some galactic things going on that early on in the season, he's just, early on in the series, he's just a guy, on a planet trying to not die, let alone deal with galactic issues.
Aren't we all?
Right? We're all just guys on the planet trying not to die. So I don't know. I just thought Cradle was way too many books. They are relatively short books at the beginning. So I really think the first 4 books could have easily been one book. And I don't know, maybe I just came into Cradle having read too much decent lit RPG to fall into what I think is many people's first experience with the genre. And it was just really slow. It just took forever for anything to interest me. And by the time that it did, I was already halfway through the series, and I generally don't DNF anything. I don't DNF series. I don't DNF books. Apart, I did do a challenge we could talk about, but once I got to about the book 6 or book 7, I was like, all right, I've crossed midway. I guess I'll finish this off and see if it gets any better. And part of it too was like, I mean, how many times have we heard, well, if you just get to book 3, it gets good, or
Oh yeah,
well,
or
if
book
you
12 in some cases.
right. I mean, I was asking Mike the other day, I was like, hey, I just finished book 11, but I hear it really gets good at book 12. So I'm going for it.
That's what my buddy Steve Donahue says is moving the goalpost. Yeah.
Right.
He's never defined it for me, but he loves that phrase, and I also enjoy, because I had that experience. You know, you read a book 5. I read book 5. I'm not sold. No. It's actually book 6. And you read book 8 is actually really where it's going to get good for you. So just wait. And I'm like, you know what? I don't believe you anymore.
Yeah. There's a credibility loss at some point.
Yeah. But what I will say is, you know, obviously it's just a personal taste thing. But one thing it always feels weird to me when someone comes and goes, hey, I'm reading this book. I hate it. You like it. When does it get good? And I'm like, I don't know how to quantify the moment a book gets good. It's just that I generally enjoyed it. Now, if there's some sort of like common thread of difficulty in a book, or like, you know, a bit of a down period in a book, then that's a little bit easier. But, you know, sometimes people are just like, yeah, when does this book get good? And I'm like, I don't know.
Well, right. I mean, it depends on what you call good. You know,
Yeah.
for some people, those deep conversations sitting in a tavern, no action going on,
Yeah.
but finding about the history of that particular character is good. To other people, that's a 4 snore. So, you know,
Yeah.
they give them 4 snores on that one. So, yeah, it just depends on what they call good.
Yeah, certainly. I have a friend, his name was Alex, and he said that, you know, he understands the slog, but it's the thing he looks forward to a little bit, because it's downtime with the characters that he loves so
Mhm.
much. And while, you know, I know a ton of people don't agree with that, that makes sense to me. Like that seems like a reasonable thing for someone to say. Jared Henderson says soon Lit RPG will be published as an Excel spreadsheet. Why not? Excel does everything. And Brent Smith said, I read a sample of Wandering In, and it made me question learning to read, because if I was illiterate, I wouldn't have been subjected to that. Ringing endorsement.
Wow.
Yeah.
He's just lost the endorsement of the Wandering In ever. Yeah.
But I do see people here saying that actually the writing ends up getting better with each volume, which isn't terribly surprising. Most authors do get better as they go, unless if they get so big that they don't, you know, have any rein,
Right.
on the reins. That can be a little bit rough.
I think Alan's favorite author, you know, has run into that a little bit.
Who's that?
Well, that's what I was going to ask you, by the way, because I know you and Alan are friends, and I don't know, does Brandon Sanderson have a baby's first book edition that, you know, that maybe I can send to him? Because I know he would appreciate that.
Listen, it is the Ides of March today, so if you have not spammed Alan's community tab with Ides of March memes, please do so. I already sent him 2. I sent a little Caesar's box with a knife in it, and then I sent him Caesar's dressing, both of which he told me he absolutely detests and hates and cannot stand.
It's okay to rip on it. You know, it was interesting because I've watched so many of Chatting with Nuts episodes, and I was on your page, and I've realized Alan's been on the show quite a bit, right? And I was trying to figure out if there's a pattern, and I think there was. It's like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, Alan. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, Alan. So now I know when he'll be coming up on the show. It's awesome.
Yeah, for me, I always try to get about anywhere between 4 to 6 episodes in between the appearances, because, you know, I can understand people maybe getting a little bit tired of us, but at the same time, it's really for me and him to catch up, because Alan's so busy.
I think it's great TV.
I agree. That's why I call him the semi-permanent co-host.
Yeah.
And truthfully, like, Alan is literally one of my best friends. Like,
yeah,
we talk more about non-YouTube, non-book stuff than we talk about, honestly, anything. I mean, it's just,
right.
It's transcended this, right?
Yeah.
So in fact, I might talk to him for 3 or 4 hours and then realize we haven't talked about books. So when he comes on Chatting with Nuts, you know, if we can get onto the book subject, if he's actually read anything, then we can talk about it, you know? So it's interesting. I think even if all this went away, I would still talk to Alan, for 3 hours just out of pure joy of that, and there's a few people I'd put in that category that I've met through BookTube, which makes it all worth it, to be honest with you.
I mean, before I knew too much about you, when I first saw you on an episode of Chatting with Nuts, I figured this is a broadcaster. This is a guy who has been broadcasting his whole career. I had no idea that you were in software. I didn't realize much about the wrestling stuff. I didn't know. I mean, you are so naturally, or I shouldn't say naturally, in whatever way you've developed yourself as a host and as a broadcaster, you make it seem just like the most easy thing in the world to do, which is not, but you make it look easy. So kudos to you. It's pretty awesome.
No, thank you, man. I appreciate it. I give a lot of credit to the wrestling industry, and it's because I was obsessed not just with my part in the production, but everyone's part in the production, and getting to talk to some really talented, lovely people in the business that their whole job was to broadcast and to pass moment by moment. That really helped me, and then also just I like working through my thoughts, and my Kelsey, my wife, could tell you that I do it all the time. And I talk to her or to myself or my cats. And a lot of these conversations, I end up learning something about myself because I just kind of talk in circles until I arrive at a point. And
that's okay.
Yeah, it's always kind of naturally to me.
Philip told me, maybe I shouldn't say it, but he told me there's been many times he's walked around the house saying, "Welcome to my show on the Best of Fantasy." Way I'll do it. So, yeah.
Philip, it's time to retire it. The shtick's old. Retire it, okay?
He can't quite yet. He can't, not till my April Fool special comes out.
Oh, okay. Man, April Fool's is soon. I've had an April Fool's idea ever since I started the channel, and every year it comes April 1st, and I go, hey, I'm not doing it. Every single day.
If you talk about costuming, my April Fool's is going to be fantastic.
I mean, I did love whenever you kind of did an acknowledgement of people that you love on BookTube that got you to the dance or whatever.
Yeah.
And, just a lot of fun and a lot of personality and disco-fying everybody. I was offended I wasn't on the list, but that's, we can talk about that afterwards.
I'll tell you, well, it's so funny. When I did that video, for whatever reason, you and Alan were in a corner of BookTube that was sort of like tangentially near me, but not exact right on the money. Because for whatever reason, I just hadn't connected with either of you two. So when volume 2 comes out, you can expect you will be disco-fied, my friend.
All right, let's go. Dude, you bring up a good point, though. There's so many times where people are like, everyone on BookTube's saying this or everyone on BookTube's reading this. And I'm like, it's really like niche. I find people all the time, they'll have like 80,000, 90,000, 300,000 subs.
Right.
And they're reading Joe Abercrombie. And I'm like, how have I never seen this channel? There are so many people.
Right.
The algorithm does kind of, narrow it down and kind of relates some channels to others. And there's a whole mass of people you've never seen on this platform. And it is not unheard of. I've even had people say before, like, hey, man, I can't believe that you didn't bring this person or blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, they're not in my purview. I didn't see them,
Right.
And then I also have like 3 different YouTube accounts that I balance things. I even had to make a completely separate one to avoid spoilers for One Piece because I was like, I'm gonna do all my One Piece stuff on here and I'll never look at the recommendations because I don't want to get spoiled in thumbnails and stuff.
That makes sense.
But my point is like, it's a humongous, platform and there's tons of people. And what we're seeing is just a little sliver most of the time.
I mean, even somebody like Bookborn, who's been on your show, I think once or more than once, maybe. Mm-hmm. I've had no interaction with her at all. It's weird because again, it's sort of like adjacent and I'm not even talking about so much me as a booktuber because I've been sort of lurking in these chats for, since the pandemic happened. So yeah, another tangential kind of a person that who knows, maybe volume 3 she'll get disco-fied. I don't know.
I mean, I would love to be disco-fied personally. I feel like I kind of missed that era.
It's happening. This book over my shoulder, where is it over here? Shogun, which came from my friend Alan, has earned him a spot being disco-fied most definitely. So yeah, I'll be doing something special for that episode.
Alan is not to praise him while he's not here, but Alan is a extremely kind person that a lot of people think is very angry, and he can be mad and stuff. But Alan sent me something in the mail this past week that meant a whole lot. I'm not going to share what it is, but it meant the world to me. And and him sending you that book after we did, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, I wish more people saw that Alan at times.
Yeah.
Because he is just an absolutely like lovely person. He really
is. As he's very fond of saying, and as I agree, he is a delight.
Yeah. He is not the Friday night delight, but he is a delight.
No, he's not. He's a delight. Lowercase a.
Brent says, I will say I watch a lot of BookTube, and BookTube streams, and Jimmy is definitely the best at the hosting thing. Thank you. I just wish he'd make more content. Hear that, Jimmy? Yeah. Well, first off, thank you. I do appreciate it. I'm not very competitive when it comes to YouTube. I realized very early on that wasn't a good idea for me because I'm competitive in other aspects of my life, and I want this to kind of be just like hanging out, right? Mm-hmm. I want to make it about the people. But I do take pride in being good at what I do. And as far as the more content thing, I'm working on it. I feel some inspiration finally. I've been doing basically wrap ups and chatting with nuts for two reasons. One, I just have been the last like 9 months for whatever reason have been extraordinarily difficult mental health wise, but also it seemed as if YouTube really liked when I stopped uploading stuff. And this isn't about the numbers or anything, but I'm seeing more people come to the channel because YouTube's looking at what I upload. They say, okay, you upload 3-hour podcast and you upload wrap-ups. So we're going to recommend you on every Theo Vaughn and Joe Rogan podcast. And then we're going to recommend you on all the big like book vloggers.
Wow.
And by the way, this is how I started finding these channels. They have 1 million subscribers and they talk about books and I'd never heard of them. And I was like, what the hell is this? Right. So part of me was like, let's see what happens here. Like, let's see how this, what comes of this, right?
It's so impossible to know really until it happens, because I don't know why the algorithm does what it does either here or where I make my living on Amazon. I mean, I don't have any idea. I can get the same amount of advertising on Amazon, and one day I do out of nowhere 5 times what I would normally do. And it's not just one person placing an order. It's from all over the country placing one order each. It's just really bizarre. So I can appreciate what you're saying.
Yeah. And sometimes, people comment on a video and I forgot I made it. I'm like, oh yeah, I did review this book. I forgot. So, actually, Brett said Ostenard content. I forgot that I did a Dragonbone chair review and a full trilogy review. So people are talking to me about like book 3, and I'm like, did I do a review for book 3? And I went back and I was like, oh, I did the trilogy. I was like, oh, that was fun. I remember that. And by the way, if anyone was wondering, Witchwood Crown's coming soon. I'm so excited. The final book in Ostenard is being released this year, and I'm extraordinarily excited. It was delayed last year, but I think I'm going to be starting the Witchwood Crown probably May, June, and I'm going to try to read into the final book release. I also have to read Of Heart of What Was Lost. I already read Brothers of the Wind. Have you read Tad Williams?
No, I have not.
You son of a gun.
Right. I mean, we all have these blind spots in our reading, and it's strange. I have not read Tad Williams. Who was the other one? That was probably the big one, I think.
I mean, Tad is, and I'm always championing him. And yes, it's because he came on the channel and talked to me. No, I loved him before I had him on, and I love him even more after getting to know the guy because he's just a wonderful human being. But
sure,
he's just one of those guys I think is integral, to the genre, and so very important. I've only ever bounced off one of his series, and it wasn't because it wasn't excellently written. It was just like one of these things where I was like, okay, it was Otherland, and it's really weird. And I like weird, but it felt like it to the point where I was like kind of losing the plot a little bit. And then I wanted to read some other stuff. So I ended up DNFing it. I might get back to it at some point, but he has written some of my favorite books ever. War of the Flowers is one of my favorite fantasy standalones. It's absolutely epic.
Very cool.
And fun. It's very fun. It's a portal fantasy.
What's it called?
War of the Flowers.
War of the Flowers.
It is not his most popular work. But when I read it, I just had an absolute blast with it. It's chunker. It's a big one.
It's all right.
has a really interesting history. I've said this before on Chat With Nuts, so I won't go into the big thing, but basically it had a very rocky publication history because of 9/11, because of scenes in the book that ended up almost being similar to 9/11 before
really?
9/11 happened, but it was published after. So it very strange things, and listen to Tad talk about it's really cool. But I'm so excited for Ostenard. I got a couple friends that are going to be reading it with me. It feels like a big deal, but I guess it's because I'm such a big Tad Williams fan.
That's okay.
Yeah. Jared said, I think we forget that behind that algorithm is a huge group of people, and huge groups of people behave in weird ways. That is absolutely true. that is absolutely true. No, and it never became more apparent to me than whenever my One Piece videos did well, and then I didn't like something, and then they were. I'm very spoiled by this audience. Everyone's very kind most of the time.
That's
Every
awesome.
now and then I make people mad, but whew. Yeah, you get into the bigger audiences. I mean, Jared, obviously, it sometimes it can be a little bit dicey to say.
Yeah.
Least.
Somebody had asked me the other day if I had gotten my first mean comment yet or something of that nature. And I was like, yeah, that's exactly when I knew that things are going well, is because if there's enough people watching me that someone hates me, cool. That's exactly where I need to be.
Yeah, and not everyone's going to like you. That's just life, And,
I mean,
luckily, I figured that out pretty early in life. Whenever I would have people write about me on wrestling message boards and wish that I was dead. So
I've literally been threatened with that on somewhat of not a regular, but on an occasional basis as a nightclub owner. I mean, you start throwing people out of the bar, they're not real happy about it. So yeah,
I'm sure, man.
I'm used to that.
Evie wants to know when I'm reading Titus Grown. I started book 1 and then DNF'd it. I'll read it at some point, but not anytime soon. I don't think. That's one of those books I have to be in the mood for. Have you read Titus Grown?
I don't even know what's about. Or
so it's the Gorman Gas trilogy by Pete, and a lot of people say it doesn't necessarily get the flowers it deserves because a lot of people look at that time period and look at Tolkien.
Sure,
but Peake basically a phenomenal writer. Like when it comes to writing, I mean, it's just excellent, very imaginative, very original, while still drawing on stuff that came before it. And unfortunately, I believe was battling with dementia in the third book, and the third book is really rough because of that.
Ooh, I would
but
think so.
Many people say Titus Grown, is as good or as important as Lord of the Rings and just doesn't get its due.
Sure.
And it's one of those things. It's not the style of it or even like the type of story it is. It's not necessarily my cup of tea, but I could definitely get behind and read it. I just have to be in the right mood for it. It's like, for instance, like I'm not going to read the Book of the New Sun every single day. I love Book of the New Sun, but I'm not going to read Gene Wolfe every single day. It's just not something I'm going to do. But whenever I'm in the mood for it, there's nothing like it.
Yep. 100%. I read something called The Worm Ouroboros back in January, and that's sort of just pre-Tolkien, era. And it's an epic tale, sort of like, the Iliad of the Odyssey, but it is, pre-Tolkien, and you got to be in the right mind space for it. No doubt.
I mean, hey, honestly, even with Tolkien, like I have to be in the mood. It just so happens that I do get in the mood more often than I think most other people who maybe haven't read Lord of the Rings and didn't have like a nostalgia factor with it.
Sure.
But when you want to read him, there's really no one else quite like him. Right. So, and that's great. That's fantastic. That's how you know that you have a voice and a tone in which you write that is special and remarkable. And really a lot of times nowadays, especially I'm sure you can relate when you've read so much, you want things to stand out. You want things to feel a little bit different and unique. I was reading Gideon the Ninth, and I soft DNF'd it because I realized I didn't have time to be reading it. And it's one of those things I don't think I should like read it every few days. Like I should just read the damn thing if I'm going to do it. So I'll return to it at some point. And I had things about it I definitely did not like. But my God, was it not unique at least? Like at least it stood out in a sea of books to me.
Right. That is important. I mean, there's enough vanilla fantasy out there that when you do run into something that is a different flavor, that's kind of nice, but you got to be in the mood for that flavor.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, there's something to be said about books that I think that just take a risk. And I know one that you read, it was part of your DNF challenge, which we can kind of talk about here after I take you to task for this. I actually haven't read this book, but I want to read this book. and that is Weave World by Clive Barker.
Okay.
And this is the one Madison had DNF'd,
Mm-hmm.
and then you tried it out. And you were saying a lot of the things I was kind of expecting, because I've read Damnation Game. I've read about half of Damnation Game. But Clive Barker is really a remarkable stylist in his writing, but he has so many weird out there ideas and was 100% working through a lot of stuff in that book. But that's a book, would you say, definitely stands out because of its weirdness, right?
100%. And it was interesting. The best part about Weave World to me was the author's introduction. He wrote a few pages about Weave World far after he wrote the book. So I don't know if it was a re-release or what they had done, but he came back and said, this is where I was in life when I wrote this book. And I'm never going to be back in that place again. Never ask me for a Weave World 2. It's never going to happen. I will never mentally be where I was when I did this. And it was just a fascinating experience to read that. And then, so when I got into the book, I was so excited at the beginning because it was such a well put together author's kind of statement pre-book. I was like, this is going to be magnificent. And the first part of it, I really enjoyed it. There were parts of it I did like.
Yeah.
I didn't hate the book. It certainly wasn't the worst book I read in the DF challenge, but I could see where somebody would put it down and go, I don't need to read about Clive's weird blood menstrual magic system. So
why not? That's my question. Why not?
I mean, to each their own. I can see where that would be weird. Elderly ghost women trying to have sex with teenage boys. So
that sounds like Clive Barker from everything I know. My friend Baron, he was Your Brain on Books. He doesn't make videos that often anymore. Fantastic reviewer. He's a big fan of Clive Barker, and he gave me the context that I guess Clive Barker had like a lot of like repressed like feelings about his sexuality and went through a lot of like traumatic experiences and was battling with this, and a very different time period, by the way, where you don't talk about these type of things, right? And I think a lot of his books was working through that and how confused he felt, or maybe even bitter at times. And I do think he was very angry. I think that comes out even in Damnation Game a little bit. So always at the core of his stories, there's some sort of like sexual aspect, and almost always people have that reaction. They're like, what is this? Right. And with that context, it makes it a little more interesting, I guess. Like he wasn't doing it just to make you go,
right. I mean, look, there's nothing I haven't seen being in, the nightclub business for 15 or 16 years that I'm going to read on a page that is going to freak me out to the point that I can't take it. It just seemed really strange choices because there was so much about that book that was really good. And then he'd come out of left field with something that just, I didn't know that it needed to really be there, because it took a story that I was really enjoying for a while and then just kind of came out of left field with something that it didn't add to the story in any meaningful way for me. So it was more of a deterrent than anything else.
Yeah. And certainly there's always the aspect of like, okay, this thing is weird. How does it fit here? And it can be jarring, especially because like that's not something you see in fantasy. Right. And this is kind of what I think he was saying is like, this is a time period where, there was a lot of stuff that was adjacent to Tolkien. And then you pick up a Clive Barker. Oh, it's a Weave World fantasy book. Clive Barker's supposed to be this renowned, stylist in his writing. And then you get that and you're like, what in the world am I reading? Right. I think knowing, maybe going into it, I will like it a bit more, but without a doubt, I'll have something to say about the book, which kind of ties back to the idea of something being unique and being able to stand out amongst the crowd is really important, because you come away from those books, even if you didn't like something about it, you want to talk about it.
Yeah, I think you're going to find at least one of the antagonists very compelling. I can tell you right now, there's a particular character that I think Jimmy is really going to like quite a bit. Happens to be an antagonist, but I think it's going to be a fan favorite for you. I do think so. So like I said, it certainly was not the worst book that I read that month. It was just, the whole point of why I did that challenge is I was trying to figure out what makes a person put a book down, because I don't DNF things. I'm famous for just never DNFing anything. And I could sort of suss out why, in that particular case, that particular friend of mine, Madison, put it
Mhm.
down. Whereas possibly somebody else, like I know John from Talking Story, who's been in the chat, is a big Clive Barker fan. He would have never given me that book as a DNF because he probably loved it. So,
Yeah.
different strokes for different folks.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of Talking Story. I'm hoping to have him on the show in the near future, actually, as well.
Yeah,
Uh,
he's a great dude. He's coming on my show in a couple of weeks too, so I'm excited.
yeah, he's a great guy, and been enjoying watching his videos. It's nice to see people just getting excited about things. That like you don't even know the person, but you feel a connection with them because they're excited about the same thing that you're excited about, which
Mhm.
is kind of the magic of what we do. Yeah, one thing I will say, and I guess I'll put a prediction out there. You've probably read Nothing Ever Like Weave World, right? Like it's probably in its own
No, it's in its own.
realm.
I
Yeah.
mean, things that I mean, I can't even really think of another book or a series that it's even really close to. It's just different. I mean, it's sort of portal fantasy a little bit, but
Mhm.
it's sort of fairy tale-ish a little bit, and it's sort of urban fantasy in a way because it happens in England. I think maybe around the turn of the century type of timeline. I don't remember, but there's a lot of elements that it's close to, but nothing that there's some horror elements, but it's not a horror book. You're right. It's hard to pin down.
Yeah, and he's famous for his horror. That is
Right.
where his kind of bread and butter is. And I know Stephen King is a massive fan. But it definitely one of those. I've seen people rate like his books 1 star and be like, "What in the world is all of this shit?" Like this is
Right.
absolutely insane. But every time I see that about a book, it intrigues me. It's the same the reason why Getting the Ninth kind of intrigued me because people hate that book, dude. Like they hate it, and I'm like, okay, maybe I won't. I don't go into it trying to be contrarian, but I'm like, let's give it a fair shot. And what you did with your challenge, trying to figure out why someone would put it down. I think that's if you want to like review books and talk about books and maybe be a resource for people to come to you to find new books, I think that is a skill or a trait that is so worth sharpening. And I wish I saw a little bit more of that. That's one of the reasons why reviews for me, I always say they're a little bit stressful. And it's not because I'm worried about saying the right things to make people happy. It's about trying to identify the things about the book that, even outside of my own experience, that are going to, maybe resonate. And I like to think that maybe I can get kind of a pulse on readership of like what certain people will like and what won't like. And to me, that's always the biggest challenge is like, well, who is this book actually for? Without saying this is the next Game of Thrones. And
Mhm.
this is this, in its own by itself on its merits, like who should read this and who should not read this, because they're both equally important when people come to you for recommendations. And I've always said this, I take recommending super serious. I do
Mhm.
not just randomly recommend people my favorite books. So many people have done that to me
Right.
and they're like, oh, you would love this book. And I'm reading. I'm like, why'd you think it? And they're like, well, I loved it. I'm like, yeah, but why would I love it? I need
Right.
to know why I would enjoy it. I don't
Right.
blanket recommend A Song of Ice and Fire to everyone, even though I would love to. And I will if someone asks me to, or if I think it's the right pick. But I want to make my recommendations solid. I take pride in that reputation, I think.
I think that that's, the only way to do it. And, another question that I've asked people before is, well, what have you loved already?
Mhm.
And if I can drill down a little bit into the kinds of things that I know they like, if
Yeah.
someone tells me they like a scoundrel type of a figure or a roguish type of an adventure, I know The Lies of Locke Lamora is probably going to resonate pretty good with that person because they already like that archetype.
Yeah.
So if I can find out a little bit about what they like already, now that's obviously difficult to do if you're making a book review video that's going to be shown to the masses.
Yeah.
You don't really know, but I mean, at least you can point out what you loved about it. And if people see the passion that, we come across at certain elements within that story, then hopefully, they can grab out of that too.
Jared said I just recommend
Right.
Dostoevsky, like when Aristotle to everyone.
I think I'm going to dress up as Aristotle just for Jared.
Hey, Jared got me to read Remains of the Day, and I'm still thinking about that book. So, Jared, you do have good recommendations. Don't sell yourself short. He also said he started Sailing to Sarantium by Guy Gavriel Kay. It is cool because it feels very classic fantasy, but the setting is so distinct, Byzantine inspiration, that it feels fresh. I am also reading Sailing to Sarantium. I'm about I think I'm on chapter 5. I think there's only 10 chapters, so I'm like 40 to 50% of the way through the book. I've been reading it kind of slow, and I'm always comparing every Guy Gavriel Kay book now to Song for Our Bond because I think it's one of the very few books when I finished it. I was like, I don't think I'd change anything about this book, which is awesome. And I think exactly what you said here, Jared, when I was trying to think about how I would talk about it in my wrap up and taking notes while I was writing it, is that it actually feels like it has the most atmosphere of any of his books. I don't know if I like it as much as Song for Our Bond. I'll have to finish it to see. But man, the Byzantine inspiration feels great in that book. My God. And
Very cool.
there's a second book. And I'm like, man, I really want to read that as soon as I'm done. Like I was wondering how long I would wait. But I think, yeah, it's just his writing is so poetic and very, very impactful at moments. Have you read much Gary Gavriel Kay?
I have read only Tagana. It
Okay.
is a 5-star book for me. I loved it. I know that there's people that are mixed on Tagana. I loved it. I just picked it up as I'm going to start somewhere. I know it's a standalone. Let me see where it goes, where I go with it. Totally loved it. I'm going to be reading The Lions of Al Rassan, I think in May.
Nice. I love Lions of Al Rassan. So I'm one of those people who was a little bit mixed on Tagana. I came to it after I'd already read 2 GGK books, and I thought Tagana was a good book, but I just thought his other books were better. I actually, it's funny. I read Lions and then I read Under Heaven, and I said, man, I just want to see him, flex more creativity when it comes to the magic stuff, because a lot of it's very low, non-existent magic.
Right.
And Tagana, he gave me that, and I went, oh, you know what? I actually didn't like that. I actually did like the low fantasy stuff he was doing. So I kind of,
Sure.
You think you want something and you don't. It's kind of like Vince McMahon used to say, you don't want what you think you want. That's what he would say about the viewers. And he was right.
True. Yeah.
He was right. At least in this respect, where I'm going to cherry pick and use that.
Yeah.
I'll be very curious to see what you think of Lions. I think it's rather good, but yeah,
I'm excited. I'm excited for it. I mean, there's just certain people that have such talent, whether it be in music or in writing or anything kind of on the creative side, where it doesn't take very much to know that you are either reading or listening to somebody who knows what they're doing. And within maybe the first 3 or 4 sentences of Tagana, I was like, okay, this author knows how to write.
He's competent.
Whether or not I am going to enjoy the story or not, I have no idea. But the way these sentences are put together and the words that he's using, I felt like this is good material. Let's hope I like the story.
Yeah, I mean, him being trusted, with some of the more, studious things like the Tolkien materials.
Right.
I mean, I think that kind of is a good endorsement for him. But I just love how much when I read Guy Gavriel Kay, I can tell it's Guy Gavriel Kay. Without being too far out there or off-putting. Like, I actually find him to be a pretty easy recommend. He's somebody that I recommend pretty readily for people who are kind of just looking for like a general way of going into, fantasy or reading fiction at all. And yeah, Sailing Strontium is going swimmingly, and hopefully I like the ending. I will say it's only like a 400 or 500 page book, and we still haven't got to Strontium. And I'm halfway through it, and I'm like,
still sailing?
Yeah, I'm like, when are we going to get to this exactly? And it's just, I did not expect it to go the way it's gone, but it's been good. So I've been pretty excited about it.
I mean, I will say that I had very low expectations going into Tagana because I hadn't really heard of Guy Gavriel Kay very much. It was one of those that I think I was looking on Goodreads and maybe it just popped up as a potential recommendation. I saw that it was a standalone, which is so rare. It seems like that we find in this epic fantasy genre that so many of us live in to find a true standalone book. And then I found out that the guy's written several standalone books. I'm like, oh, geez, this would be great because I'm not always looking to put a 6-book series in the middle of my TBR. So if I can slot in some of these standalones with a very competent author, let's go.
Yeah. And you get a fresh set of characters each time. And the thing that I really like about his work is every time I've cracked open one of his stories, I mean, it really does feel like, a new world or at least a new setting within maybe a same world because some of the stuff's connected, but like he always takes the time to establish these things. And when I read Lions of Al Rassan, I was like, is this really a standalone? Like it feels like the beginning of an epic series.
Right.
And then part of you, after you're saying I want a standalone, part of
you want book 2 afterwards.
Yeah, I wouldn't mind another story following the Song for Our Bond. I would have loved to see some of these characters go on. So I'm very excited that Lord of Emperors is a sequel to Sailing the Strontium because I'm kind of sad it's already, halfway over. I want more of it.
Right.
But yeah, he's just, he's fantastic. And I don't think Guy Gavriel gets enough credit. Obviously people know him.
Sure.
And it's kind of what Key is saying, I feel like GGK is an author's author. He's well respected by authors and critics, but doesn't get the mass appeal that he deserves. I feel that same way about Tab Williams, actually. Ted does sell a lot, but he's in America. It doesn't feel like he's as big as maybe he should be. And I would definitely say the same thing about Guy Gavriel. Like I've never seen a GGK book in my bookstores here ever.
Right.
Not once.
Yeah. I think, no, you're right. I haven't seen one either.
Yeah. And I know in Canada, his stuff is carried. Cause Canadians are they're killing it when it comes to fantasy. And one person I even thought of is one Brent mentioned. It was just R. Scott Baker. And people might not like, the content of his work or his story or whatever. But like, I think when you read the prologue to Darkness Comes Before, you're like, oh, okay. This is someone who's like going for it. And his writing is just evocative. There's a weight to his weight weight to his writing that I find to be quite remarkable. And he's another Canadian. He's another one.
Maybe they grow him, to write books. Yeah.
It's all the cold weather.
I mean, I'm not that far from Canada.
You're basically Canadian.
If I get in the car and start driving north, I could probably get there in about 9 hours across the border. So sure.
Yeah. I mean, for you, you're Canadian. I mean, let's be honest. Like
fair enough.
You're barely American at this point. It's fine.
I mean, I have an American passport. If anyone from U.S. Customs is watching at the moment, I swear I'm here legally, mostly.
I'm going to SWAT you live on air. You're actually
right.
You're going to want to duck. Okay?
Before we do that, can I please put the disco outfit on before the SWAT team gets here?
I would love to see you nightsticked while wearing your disco uniform.
Give me time for the fog machine to warm up and really make this thing. I got some lights over there, some lasers. We'll get those going. Let's make this a whole production.
Well, they might think it's gun smoke, and then
then I'm in trouble.
It's going to be,
yeah. You'll probably send me stripper police cops.
I can't afford them.
Oh well,
the SWAT's free.
Oh, okay.
I shouldn't joke about this. YouTube probably won't like that.
Remember, folks, it's the Fantasy Network, not BellTube, right? Exactly.
It's all fiction here. It's all fiction. McScarfield's bringing up an author that I've been very curious to try. I actually own The Winter Road by this author, but we're talking about standalones. This is an author that I don't see a lot of people talk about, but when people do seem to pick up Adrian Selby's books, they love it. He said, I've only been reading one book so far this March, Brother Red by Adrian Selby. And Selby never fails to do grimdark that chills you to the bone and breaks your heart while reading it. I've only read the first chapter of The Winter Road just to try it out. I always read like the first page or chapter of every book I get in the mail. And one thing I was struck by is how unique the voice was for the character. And I was like, oh, okay. Like this is not going to be just like I'm telling you a story, but like really flexing the craft. Almost felt literary in a sense. I kind of hate classifying those things, but this is someone that's taking great care of their character voice, which I really like. So I'm excited to try Selby. I've heard good things.
How do you figure out your own TBR? I know you're the interviewer tonight, but that is my question for you. How do you figure out your TBR if you're getting things in the mail? And obviously you're a great lover of many authors. What goes into your decision making when you make a TBR?
So first off, I love when guests ask me questions. Actually, those are my favorite guests, the people that ask questions, because I always want it to be a back and forth, right?
Sure.
So thank you for asking this question. I have usually looked at those gaps that we talked about earlier, like, hey, what are some big names that I didn't read? Last year, it was like a lot of Octavia Butler, Michael Moorcock, Philip K. Dick was also on that list, and I read those, and I had a great time doing that. So a lot of times it's that. Then there's just stuff, and folks listening, and you, Brian, you guys know what I'm saying. Sometimes there's just books that have called to you, or authors that have called to you, and you have no idea why, and they have to go on the list. I felt this way whenever I read Grace of Kings by Ken Liu. Okay. I didn't know really anything about it other than people were saying it was a Song of Ice and Fire adjacent, so I knew it was a lie because everyone says everything's Game of Thrones. So I was like, okay, I'll just ignore that. But there was something about it I just knew, and then I read it, and it was absolutely fantastic. So, the answer is that also, honestly, I have a Patreon Discord, and if people get excited about stuff in there, it's very contagious. That's the community. It's my community, and
Sure.
I interact with them on a daily basis. And when people get fired up, it's fun. It's fun to kind of join in. So one of the things is Ada Palmer's "To Like the Lightning," that book, and I'm blanking on the actual name of it for some reason right now, which is embarrassing. But that's something that immediately went on my TBR because like 9 people read it and they were all like, "This is crazy! Like you have to read this." And I know it's Book of the New Sun, like inspired her,
right?
Which is kind of cool.
She wrote that whole four part to it, right? The foreword.
Yes, and it was so good. And actually, that was what put it over the edge. Terra Ignota. Thank you, Evie. I always forget the name of it. Her forward put me over the edge, just like David Mitchell's forward for Left Hand of Darkness put me over the edge to read David Mitchell. So forwards, while they can spoil a lot of things, and you have to beware, especially when it's Neil Gaiman, they can actually end up opening me up to like a new person I'd never heard of, which is cool. So the TBR this year, to get to this, I've done a lot of this stuff. I've done a lot of the people I thought were gaps, a lot of the stuff that's drawn to me. And now I'm really just reading what seems interesting. And it's a bit chaotic, dude. This month has been a bit chaotic. I think I have started 5 or 6 books this month.
Really?
It's bad. It's bad. I think I finished 1 book this month so far. But you know what? Who cares?
Yeah,
Who cares?
if you've got the brain space to do it, that's awesome. I can't do that. I've got 2 books always going, one physical that I'm reading or on Kindle, and the other is usually like a lit RPG in my headphones. But to pick up 5 books and have them all going simultaneously, there's a lot of people that do it. I don't know what. I think I just want to pick it up and finish it, and I think maybe I'm sequentially minded that way. I don't know.
I have been, and actually lately I've been doing a better job at it. But there was just something where I feel like I could not satiate the hunger for just different things. And I do have that wide palette. So there was just, I kind of want to read a little bit of a Murakami novel, give him another try. I kind of want to read Gideon the Night. I kind of want to read Dune, Children of Dune. I also want to read Cloud Atlas. I also want, you know what I mean? And it just like kind of happens. Now, one thing I will say is I always put a caveat in these things, and I say I may not finish it. Like Gideon, I read like 140, 150 pages, and I put it down, and I will return to it. But there's no guarantee that I'm going to finish something. And someone just said, "Dead House Gates." Funny enough, I started rereading Gardens of the Moon, and I'm in book 3 of it, or book 2 right now. I'm like, what am I doing?
See,
I can't reread Malazan right now. Like, I cannot do this, but I am.
Focus. I just read Gardens of the Moon last month for the first time. So my community, we did a little bit of a poll in my community tab, and it won by like 3 votes over Long Price Quartet. So I started Garden of the Moon at the same time I was reading Shogun, at the same time I was reading Sun Eater. So my brain space was fairly occupied.
Yeah, I mean, it also depends on what novels you're reading, how much of them you're reading. What happens to me, if I'm reading multiple books at once, 1 or 2 are going to bubble up. That's what's going to happen. Cloud Atlas started as kind of a side read. I was reading like 10 pages a day, and then slowly I started reading 30 pages a day, and then 40. And I'm like, oh my God, this is amazing. And it fluctuates, right? And all these books are fairly different, which does help with that. But I always have a priority book that I'm like, I have to get this done. So right now it's A Little Life. That book was the Patreon pick of the month. I have to finish that. Like, that's the only required read I have, is whenever a patron pick comes, I read it always, and I get it done in the month. So that one is 850 pages or some madness. And I've been plugging away, man, doing like 1 hour, 2 hours a day reading it. And I'm still not halfway through the damn book. And I'm just like, this is incredibly long. I like it, but man, is it long.
Yeah. I mean, I feel you. Like I said, I just read Shogun a couple of weeks ago, and I did that straight through. I wasn't intending to, but I wanted to know how the story ended. So there was 1,300 pages, and I'm about halfway through Demon in White right now, which is book 3 in Sun Eater. And that's a dense book, and it's, 700 and some pages. So yeah, I feel you there.
Slammer as well. What a book, man. What a fun experience Demon in White was. And yeah, you're right. It is a bit dense too. Like, there's a lot of trippy stuff in especially books 2 and 3 for me. In Sun Eater. Shogun's one that I think I've just admitted that I will never read. Not because I think it's bad, but it's just so big. And I don't have a general interest in it, to be honest with you. Like, that time period is not very interesting to me. Which is why I haven't watched the show. I hear it's amazing.
Yeah.
But I haven't watched it yet. I will eventually.
Do it if you want to, or don't. I mean, if it doesn't call to you, I don't know. There's something about, for me, I don't know if it's that I was such a big fan of Highlander when it came out. He had a katana, so I would think about, that is my improper memory of 16th century, Japan. But I don't know what it is. So for some reason, I got really drawn into wanting to know. And I also remember, because I was in elementary school when the original Shogun came out on the miniseries, I think on ABC Network in the 80s. And I remember my parents, sending me out of the room so they could watch Shogun in peace. So I think maybe part of me wanted to find out what I was missing from my childhood.
You just saw Tom Cruise as The Last Samurai, and you were like, "This is it.
That's it, right?"
It is The Last Samurai. I will probably watch a show because I've just heard it's a fantastic television show.
It is.
So I will probably give it a go. And also, I see Christopher Navo saying here that Shogun's hitting better than the book, which is rare for me. I mean, even Alan, who I don't think Alan really watches that much TV. Even he said, he's like, dude, like, you should watch it. It's really good.
They've done a good enough job, in my opinion, of adapting it for a mainstream audience to kind of heighten and maybe make up a little bit of extra drama that wasn't in the book, so the American audience doesn't get bored and DNF the series, basically. But for the most part, it's pretty faithful. And anything that's not, it's mostly about trying to, I think, retain viewers and keep this thing to a tight 10 episodes and move on.
Yeah, for me, there's always going to be concessions because they do have to appeal to a large audience. And I fight this fight a lot in A Song of Ice and Fire because of the Bend the Knee podcast. And about half of our audience, at least, is show watchers. But there's people, they shouldn't have changed it. But it's like, if mom and pop aren't watching it, like if your neighbor's not watching it, it's not going to get renewed, most likely. With big budget, not going to get renewed. Now, the nice thing about Shogun, it's one season. They said they're doing one, and that's perfect. They should just do one and call it a day.
It's crazy. I mean, episode 1, I think it was like the first 300 pages of the book. It was like, yeah. I was like, oh my God, they are booking through this thing literally.
Yeah, and it seems like people don't mind that pace. So hey, that works. I'm glad that it's succeeding. I'm glad that it's gotten so many good reviews, and I'm also glad that it's on something that isn't just HBO, because I'm a huge HBO fan. I think they are the best, but like I would like someone else to step up and be able to, like, so when I see a fantasy adaptation get picked up by Hulu, I'm not like, oh my God, it's like, oh,
there's some hope, right?
Yes,
and I think Apple TV does a pretty decent job as well. Yeah.
Hey, Severance is the best show on television, and I am aware House of the Dragon exists. Like, and that's coming from someone who's biased. I think Severance is the best television show.
So I haven't seen that yet, but I am in season 4 of For All Mankind on Apple.
So good.
Oh, my dude, I'm telling you, it is.
Did I start it?
100% yes, absolutely.
I also like M. Night Shyamalan's show on there, Servant.
Haven't seen it.
It's a bit hokey. Like if you're not an M. Night Shyamalan fan, which we all are at some point or not at some point, you probably won't like it. But it's shot really well, and it actually takes care of like what the characters do for a living. Like one's a broadcaster, and then one is a cook in New York City, and they actually like take care of like those details. It's very good. I won't go on a pitch for it, but Apple TV is definitely one of the services that I'm intrigued by. Even Foundation, which didn't get huge ratings, and I know they had to change a lot of stuff because of just how Foundation is structured.
I mean, if Foundation, that I think is a hard show to keep, to the book and still make it interesting for the mass, market people out there.
Yeah, and time jumps, and they solved it with cloning, which I thought was a fantastic idea. Like that is a really good way of adapting that book. Cool. Yeah,
I haven't seen it, but I'll check it out on your recommendation. But 100%, you should start if you like science fiction, and I believe you do. For All Mankind, you can't go wrong with it. It is so good.
Yeah, I've heard really good things about it. And also Silo, I read the book because I wanted to watch the television show, and I ended up reading the book and loving it, and I haven't watched television show yet. And I read book 2, which I liked the first half of the book. The second half of the book, I felt like it started getting a little samey. But yeah, I definitely need to check out For All Mankind because there's no more Expanse, and I would really like I'd really like to.
I
That's a
wish
book series I need to finish.
I really wish they would have, not ended at season 6 because there was more to tell. Obviously, there's, more in the series. Yeah, that was a bummer because it was such a well-made show.
I agree. I loved it from the get go. I didn't even know it was a book series until like season 4, and I was like, "Oh, this is crazy."
And I don't even need to read the books now. Awesome.
Yeah, and I read the first 2, and I really like them. But we talked about our like little sliver of YouTube.
Yeah.
I feel like so many people are like, they're so mid and they're just whatever, that like it is somehow affected. Like, even though I love the first 2 books, I've just kind of like not been excited to continue, even though truly, if I didn't do any of this, I probably would have read them in a row, like, because I really enjoyed them that much. And I love the television show too. So, there's some services out there, Apple TV is probably one of them that I would be happy if they got something that I cared about. But I always like HBO to be the one, to be honest.
Well, it's the one, that probably has the smallest chance of screwing it up.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's like a level of competency that you can expect from them as a broadcast channel. So
sure.
I like them quite a bit. A Journey Through the Pages says, if you want your channel to blow up, then definitely post a review of A Little Life. We'll be really interested to see what you think of it when you finish. So I'm thinking about shooting a reading vlog for the very first time. And that would be one of the things that I was talking about, because I have been having so many thoughts as I'm reading, and I like speaking them. So I'm not always typing them. Like, I don't feel like I get my thoughts across. I feel like I come across negative actually in text. But whenever I talk about it, so I've been thinking about shooting a reading vlog, including A Little Life. And I will say, every time I open up this damn book, it's like it's raining outside. Not that it actually is. Reading this book feels like a rainy day.
Really? So that's good? Yes.
Is it? I don't know. Some people like rainy days. Some people like rainy days. Some people hate them. I don't know how I like the book, but
sure,
it's rough. Like, it is one of the heaviest things I've ever read.
So tell me, if you were going to do a vlog, then how would you do it? Would you just film with your phone and just look into the phone and start talking? And okay.
Yeah. So I actually bought a wireless mic setup, like the Rode wireless mics.
Sure.
And I'm going to be using those. And I actually am going to film, I think, primarily on my phone. And then my idea is to cut in some B footage of just things I do, some jiu-jitsu classes or MMA classes or whatever I'm doing. Working out at the gym. There's beautiful parks near me. I would love to just film some of the nature that I'm blessed to be around. So
yeah,
just something that's different that I've never tried, but also maybe push me to try to be better at the whole video thing.
I think what it would do is give you some new elements for your storytelling. So, I think there's just certain things that you do in life, like going to the gym or walking in nature, that really kind of add the more complex layers to who you are, that you can tell in a vlog style. Very different, I think, than sitting, as we're doing right now, just behind a microphone talking.
Yeah. And you know what else it does? Not only that, but it gives me opportunity to talk about these books that I start and never finish. And not be like, I DNF this book, but just be like, man, I got this book in today. I read the first chapter of it, and it was just an absolute banger. And I can't wait to read this. This is, it kind of gives people an insight of like what's going on in my reading process. Because especially this year where I'm just mood reading, I didn't really make any pledges. I did a Chatting with Nuts solo, and I held up about 12 books. I said, I'd like to get to these. These are books I'd like to get to. No guarantee that I will. And I think some of them, unfortunately, I don't think I will be able to fit them in. So embracing the chaos, looping people in on what I'm reading, I think would be fun. Maybe it'd be a good thing.
I think so too. And I think one of the things about BookTube that I have found, both personally as a creator, but also as a viewer before that, was that anybody cares what anybody else they don't personally know is reading. I had no idea how much I would actually care what you're reading, but I do. I want to know what Jimmy Nuts is reading. I want to know what Alan's reading. I want to know what all of my favorite booktubers are reading. I never in a billion years thought that would be something that's of great interest to me. And yet it is. And so it really amazes me that people care about what I'm reading, because my friend network around here is not a bunch of fantasy and science fiction readers.
Yeah.
At all. My family's not readers. So, I mean, my mom is sort of now, but, and my mom actually read Lonesome Dove. We did a buddy read pretty much
Hmm.
together. It was
Your
awesome.
book of the year last year, right?
It was my book of the year. It
Yeah.
was, and I got to tell you, like I read Swan Song January 3rd of last year, and I thought there's no way this is going to get unseated for my book of the year. And how did I find my book of the year on January 3rd? That's insane. And then of course, I read Lonesome Dove, and there we have it. But yeah, so it really, it blows me away that anybody cares about what books that I'm interested in, just because it has not been a part of my day-to-day life ever before finding BookTube,
Yeah.
even as a viewer.
Yeah.
I think
I struggle with that. I'm like, does anyone actually give a shit? Like, does anyone actually care?
they do.
I am
They
always
do.
surprised whenever we go live and we have over 100 people watching at one time. I'm always like, what? And then some of
Yeah.
the episodes hitting, 100,000. I'm like,
Right.
it's a bit, actually, it's very odd for me at times, wherever I feel like almost like this weird pressure. And then sometimes I think that no one cares, or no one, and another thing on the internet, new things come about. There's shiny new objects. Sometimes you wonder, like, you've only been doing this for a little bit. I've been doing this for a few years. There are times where you're like, maybe it's over. Like, maybe no one,
Right.
you know what I mean? People are tired of
Right.
seeing your thing. So that's another thing about the reading vlogs, though, is it gives me a different way of talking about books. It also gives it just a totally different process of making the videos. And, maybe it'll attract people that hadn't tried my channel before, because not everybody likes to watch these. Right?
I guarantee you, not only will it attract people that haven't seen your show before, I just think even your talking head stuff like you and I are doing right now will also improve, because you've developed as a storyteller and you're thinking about adding in these other elements to the content that you're putting out. I think it's amazing. I study as many booktubers that I find competent as possible, because I'm trying to accelerate my own learning curve and how to do this in a way that I both enjoy, but also lots of people enjoy as well. And I watched a guy the other day. I think he inserted almost 30 B-roll cuts of footage into a 14-minute video. And he did it in a compelling way. I know, but it was compelling. It was like, this makes sense. This actually works here. And yeah, they're like boom, 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 right? I mean, you're not seeing anything for more than a half a second. But to me, I was like, okay, this guy is paying attention to the story that he's trying to tell. So, and I even asked him, I said, did you have an editor to do this? Because it seems to me like this would have been something an editor would have done. He said, no, I did that one myself. So I was like, wow, okay.
Yeah, it's a lot of work. It's a lot of work. And you
It
got to be
is.
organized if you want to get it done in any reasonable amount of time. And I'm always impressed with what people can do. I've been saying lately that I almost like a little bit more unpolished YouTube. And Brent's actually saying here, speaking of different sides of BookTube, I found a channel with 70K followers that post 90-minute, 2-hour to 2-hour vlogs weekly. Even if our tastes are a lot different, it's comforting to put them on for some reason. I have been really drawn to people that are a little bit rougher around the edges. And I've always been a little bit like this. Like, I think YouTube was a little better when it was a less polished platform, to be honest with you. I'm not saying that I don't like those things. Like, I like things like Nexpo. I don't know if anyone watches Nexpo. It used to be Nightmare Expo. He does like a lot of internet mystery videos, and his editing it's insane. Like, it is actually crazy, right? Or someone like Caption Words, who is a phenomenal editor. Right. But you know what, man? When I turn on a Brian Lee Durfee, there's just something about it. I have literally went to Brian's channel and I have just hit play all. And while I work, just listen to Brian Lee Durfee. I'm author of The Forgetting Moon. I love it, dude. I love it. It's so raw.
Welcome everybody back to the #1 television show in the history of the universe.
Yeah.
All right. Welcome. Yeah. He's, again, different appeals for different moods and different things. I am a huge Brian Lee Durfee fan. I think his books are hugely underrated. I wish they were on every bookshelf in America. I think they ought to be. As far as like what I do, and I've been very blessed with some amazing compliments that at least my program as I've gotten started looks somewhat as professional as I knew at least how to kind of try to do, but thank you. But in some ways, it was probably an attempt for me to provide some cover for myself, just in case any of my opinions were crap or any of my takes were so flat out wrong. At least it looks like I know what I'm talking about. Whether or not I do or not, debatable. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, one of the things that you avoid is that objective tone that some people will have, and that's whenever people start getting graded, right? Whenever you're like, well, this is the best, definitively, I am correct. You don't have that tone,
Never.
which is actually a very good thing, at least for me. I actually think speaking with that tone can result in people really believing you, and people like confidence.
Mhm.
I think being a self-proclaimed fence sitter, as I am, definitely does not lead to people being like, well, he knows what he's doing, because I'm always arguing with myself. But I think as long as you
Why do you
stay away
suppose that is?
I just am always aware that I am missing something. Always in my
Sure.
life, certainty has never not made a fool of me.
Really?
I mean, I have said things and been so convicted when I said it, and then learned new information or changed or had a different perspective given to me, and I felt like such a fool. And I think some of that comes with just growing up. I think it also has to do with interacting with people from different backgrounds and different
Mhm.
areas. So I can sit here and, I can point out something that I didn't like, for instance, like, and we'll just say Wheel of Time. I know you love the
Sure.
Wheel of Time. I'm not a huge Wheel of Time fan, but I cannot with confidence come on and just say that, Wheel of Time is objectively like this terrible thing. Like,
Mhm.
I will give my opinion and what I experience with it, but I am 100% someone could change that perspective, and that maybe not change my mind, but show it in a different way. And I would like to be able to kind of highlight those things as well. It goes back to being able to see things for an audience, right? Seeing who would like and who wouldn't like certain things, right?
See, I'm gonna challenge you on that a little bit. Like, I don't know that you're so much a fence sitter as you are adaptable. You seem willing to take input, whether it comes from somebody that you respect or somebody that might have a deeper knowledge of a particular subject matter,
Mhm.
that if they change your perception of it, you adapt to it more than you are feeling a fool for having a different thought prior to that input of information. So I don't know. I think you're more adaptable than maybe you think. I don't know.
Well, I I think you're right to an extent. I think adaptability is one of my better strengths, actually. I've always said you can put me anywhere, and as long as I have an internet connection, I'll probably survive.
Yeah.
That's just who I am. So I do adapt. I do adapt, and that of course comes from other things I've done in life, I would say. But the other thing is, like, I feel like if I'm so certain about something that I shut off the opportunity to learn something,
Hmm.
and I don't like that. Now, that doesn't mean that I don't have convictions about certain things.
Hmm.
Like, there are things, especially more serious things, that I feel pretty concrete about, and I still will be open-minded to things. Uh, I worry fence sitting can be dangerous.
Hmm.
I think that there are times where you should take a stand for something. But when we're talking about books,
Right.
why not be open-minded? Why
Right.
not? And now it is kind of fun to dig your heels in and have a good old argument, right? Like, that is kind of fun every now and
Right. And some people have made a booktube shtick of it, right? So I mean, that's just their deal. They're
then.
gonna draw a line in the sand, and Brandon Sanderson is terrible, and that is that.
And subjectivity is implied on the internet, in my opinion. Even whenever
Yeah.
someone maybe thinks that is not, I always
Right.
imply subjectivity to someone's opinions. And once you're able to do that, and if you can get past that hurdle, I think people become a lot more digestible. I've heard people get on Daniel Green about this a lot. Like, people are like, he says things with such authority. I'm like, well, he just has that conviction about these things. But I've
Hmm.
also seen that guy change his mind before.
Hmm.
I've seen him reverse his opinion. He has videos where he's like, I've changed my mind on a couple of things.
Hmm.
And unfortunately, when you're that popular, people will say he was lying. You could see it.
Right.
In my opinion, I think it's someone who probably just looks back and goes, "Man, I was dumb back then," because I
Yeah.
do that all the time.
Yeah. I mean, you just didn't have the information then that you did now, or you didn't have the maturity level that you do now,
Mhm.
or something, you didn't have a particular experience prior to then that now you're seeing things through a different lens. So yeah, I can absolutely get that.
Yeah, and I think that's also why I am very comfortable when I DNF something, is because as soon as my curiosity to find something redeeming about something is gone. Like I'm like, I'm not even interested in finding out what is appealing about this. That's when I know I can DNF it, because at that point I almost feel like I'm not reading in good faith anymore.
Right.
And I'll step away from it. And I got that to that point in Wheel of Time, and kind of slid away from it. And I think there are strengths to that series for sure. And I actually understand greatly why people love it.
Yeah.
It just happens to not be my favorite thing. Now, you did a video today, and I did not get a chance to watch it, but it was should you read the Wheel of Time, or something along these lines. And I'm sure you probably ruffled some feathers with it, because
I mean, I think that my channel is still small enough that the people that are actually seeing my content probably understand me pretty well at this point in my young journey here, that I'm not getting the fandom jumping down my neck about certain things. In the way that I presented this video, it was mostly, here are the pros, here are the cons, and I laid them out. I called them as I see them, right? The balls and strikes. I just called them as I saw them, and I pointed out things that I think are, not the greatest. And I pointed out things that I thought were pretty cool. And I try to do it in such a way that if people were thinking about it, it gives them a little bit more information to make a decision. And I also said, look, you really, at the end of the day, if you're going to do this, if this sounds even appealing to you, you almost need to read the first 4 books to make an ultimate decision, because those books are a little bit different from each other, and the series doesn't really take off until about then. So rather than thinking about, do I want to commit to a 14, book, gigantic 4.5 million word series? Can you commit to reading the first 4? If the answer is I'm not even sure, then just don't even start. Well, I can read book 1, then I wouldn't even start.
Yeah, I've actually said, this is one of my hotter takes, and I've said it multiple times. So I guess this is one of the things I've kind of sat down on and been like, this is something I think is, what would you recommend to someone getting into fantasy? And I actually say Wheel of Time.
Do you really?
I don't even like it.
I wouldn't even say Wheel of Time. No way.
I get so much pushback. And I know people in the chat have heard me say before, and they're like, you're an idiot. What are you doing? You're ruining them. And I'm like, well, it just depends on who they are.
Yeah.
What you're interested in. But I had a good time with the first few books. I really did.
Yeah.
It just didn't end up coming out in the wash for me when things started to kind of open up and get away from actually some of the more Tolkien side of things. Like I actually enjoyed some of the things that he kind of brought back and used. So, it's a tough series to talk about, because whenever you have that many words and an author change, there's bound to be things that aren't going to land with people.
That's right. And part of the video that I talked about was that there were times that I truly, and I'm sure I'm wrong, but it felt to me as a reader that Jordan wasn't exactly sure where he was going in the section that I was reading at the time. He may have known how the story ends. He may have known, what the final result might be, but there's large sections that I just felt like he was sort of writing for the sake of writing. It didn't seem like it was for an intent or a purpose. And I explained that today, saying, look, there's times that it's bloated, and there's times that I felt like I wasn't, like, for example, you love, as I do, the Book of the New Sun, and we had confidence that Gene Wolfe was sort of intentionally leaving us little breadcrumbs here and there, but it was kind of a mystery to be solved along the way, but we thought that the author knew what the mystery was. There's a lot of parts of the Wheel of Time that I'm not sure Robert Jordan knew exactly where he was going. At least that's how it felt to me as a reader. I didn't feel that in Book of the New Sun.
Yeah, man, that's a tough one, because I like the exploration from the author side of things. Like I don't know if you really need to know where you're going, but you are running the risk of having some meandering moments or things that maybe people would consider to be bloat. Now, I bet if you sat down Robert Jordan and asked him, I bet you would say that I bet he would be able to defend almost everything he put in those books.
For sure. There's with the amount of notes that it sounds like he kept and the information that he told his wife, it sounds like you are probably correct. And that's why I kind of qualified what I was saying by saying it's just how it read to me. Yeah. I'm not in the man's mind. I don't know. It could be he's just operating at a totally higher level than me. That's entirely probable and possible. So, yeah.
Yeah. And that's one of the things that I'm so thankful for in this like kind of like new age of reading, I guess, is that authors are being a lot more transparent about their work and their process and what they think. And molasses is not everyone's cup of tea, but the fact that Steven Erikson has been so visible
Mhm.
and transparent and like, his writing and sometimes the things that were really tough to write and what he was thinking about, and also combining it with, his best friend's other works that he knew were coming. And I wish sometimes, we could hear more from someone that when Robert Jordan was alive, or a Gene Wolfe,
Right.
or
Right.
even George R. R. Martin, who is probably a little bit more transparent than other people. His is all self-deprecating, which is why I love the man.
Yeah.
Does not buy into his own hype in the least in that
But
regard.
but I also think that, for all of George's, flack that he does take, he's not putting stuff on a page just to put it on a page because it's time for The Winds of Winter to come out already. He's not doing that to the readers. He's not willing to sacrifice what he's already put out into the world for the sake of doing another book. And he's not stupid. He knows he's not, 35 years old. I think I think legacy is important to him, and he doesn't want 6 and if 7 ever comes out or whatever to be subpar, or at least,
Yeah.
to be known as, yeah, well, at least he finished it. I don't think he wants to be in that place. So he'll do what he does.
Yeah, and he had one of the most depressing updates I've ever seen on his blog. I read every post he makes, even if it has nothing to do with the song of Ice and Fire. I like the guy.
Doesn't he like talk about the Giants every so often?
Oh, dude,
Yeah.
he loves and hates the Giants and the Jets. There's also a correlation between him writing more when they're winning, just so everybody knows. But he is he definitely cares still.
Mhm.
He cares, and he does work on a lot of things, but it's crazy. He basically says that he's written all these words and he's not sure he made a damn bit of difference in the world. And I was like, God, that is the saddest thing I have ever read in my, like, for someone who has impacted my life greatly.
Right.
I wouldn't be here talking to you today if I
Right.
had read Game of Thrones.
Right.
And he was just saying that the world's in a really bad place, and he looks at his status. He's like, everyone says I have this status and I can make this change. He's like, I've written millions of words, and now I didn't change anything. Like, what have I done with my life? And I'm like, oh my God, George.
But I mean, in reality, I think he can cut himself some slack. There's probably been a dozen humans that have been on the planet since people could walk and talk that have made such a worldwide difference to the level that he's talking about.
Yeah.
So,
and this is not something new. Writers have been doing this for a long time. I think Tolstoy, with the death of Ivan Ilyich, was getting at this, living a life where you look back and you realize the thing, you reap what you sow. And at the end of it all, you look back and there's no more time for promise or ambition or what ifs. The window's closed and you look at what you've done, and that is it. That is your body of work. And
that's it.
We always even me, I'm only in my 30s, but I look back at my 20s, I go, I'll never be in my 20s again.
Right.
And that is, so at some points, very tough pill to swallow. So I think it's a pretty natural thing. And I've always appreciated George because I think he's been pretty transparent with at least that side of the process, like the real struggles that he goes through. But if he wanted to, he could release anything and it would sell millions of copies.
That's right. But I think he cares about the work more than he cares about himself.
Yeah, absolutely. And another thing is he does a lot, and people don't talk about this too much, but he works on a lot of things about keeping writers that inspired him or he was friends with their stuff alive. Like Night of Cooters is a TV show he's been working on, adapting the material that his friend wrote. And then if you go to his blog, there's people I've never even heard of, and he's like, this person's a great, and we're going to do this TV show, and he's working on those things. So I think he also sees a little bit beyond himself as well,
sure,
which I'm a pretty big fan of. But that is one of the cool things about what we're doing, on the YouTube side of things, and one of the positives, I guess, of social media is that there are opportunities for authors to talk about their work, their process, and their intent, which is cool.
It's the coolest thing. I was very blessed and fortunate that Janny Wirtz reached out to me on Twitter and sent me to Ride Hell's Chasm, which I'm reading next month. And that just didn't happen, prior to BookTube. We didn't really to have these kind of author connections as the fandom. It's just incredible. And
Yeah, and
authors seem to be far more willing to do it than any other creatives that I've seen. I mean, I don't see Hollywood A-list level actors interacting with their Twitter followers the way that authors do. And it's just fantastic.
yeah, and like someone like Jenny Warts, has been around for decades and has all of this context and information about like why things were they were, and maybe who's even been forgotten or looked over, and it's just incredible that you have that opportunity to share conversation with someone like that.
Yeah.
Which is, I will say, one of the cooler benefits of having a YouTube channel that people like to watch is that you can have people on. I got to talk to Tad Williams.
Right.
Dope.
You got to swat me on live TV.
Dude, I wish. Oh my goodness. I would love it. No.
You know me, I would love it too. I'd be like, we're making good show here.
I think you
got a
could
good
hand
program
up for me. You could really.
There's no doubt.
I remember one time I told Alan I wanted him to go through a break and entering on live. I was like, man, I just love if someone robbed you right now. And he was like, what?
Yeah.
It's good for the show. And he's like, why would you wish that on me? Like, you just don't get it.
I think it'd be awesome. I get, find the hidden swords that are back here somewhere, and the dagger that's under the coffee table. Absolutely.
What are all these drugs here?
All these BellTube madness things come out.
You talked about some stuff that wasn't so good about the Wheel of Time, and I wanted to kind of highlight, because I have a lot of close friends. Actually, one of them's in the chat here, Benjamin. He loves Wheel of Time. He has a Wheel of Time tattoo, and I love hearing him talk about this series. Brent said Wheel of Time has these flaws, but I have such fond memories of reading it across an entire year, and since I've read a bunch of mid-ass fantasy, that made it rise in my memory. And I think 2 points I wanted to get to. First is just a statement. It is so important about your experience when you're reading. It is. There's things that Dark Tower, I know it's one of your favorite series, is one of mine. I remember when I was reading it, how I was experiencing certain moments of where I was in this world, when I was going through moments in that world, listening on audio, just like really cool stuff like that. But what's your favorite thing about Wheel of Time?
I mean, I have a few things. The world building has to be right up there, because he built just an incredible world. For me, it's right on par with what George did with Westeros. It's pretty insane that way. I'm not a real big like magic system kind of a guy, like, creating rules of magic. It's not so much that. For me, I think the best part about the Wheel of Time is this concept of, and again, I talked about Dark Tower, and this particular concept in my video today about this is Ka being a wheel. And this whole concept of this karmic cycle that in the history of that particular series keeps coming around and around and around again. And every book kind of starts the same, with the same prologue, entries of the wheel is turning. It's a beginning, but it's not the beginning. And that theme to me really resonates, that life tends to cycle in certain ways, and if you pay attention to it, you might recognize some patterns. And I noticed that about the Wheel of Time. Yes, I loved the adventures, and I loved, finding out who the Dragon Reborn was going to be, and I wanted to know about Luz Theron and all of that. But just this whole Matt, just this whole feeling of all of this has happened before, and all of this is happening now, and it probably will happen again, is a really deeply felt theme for me as a person that I really developed from reading The Dark Tower. And if you've read the entire Dark Tower, you know what I mean. I don't want to spoil The Dark Tower for anybody. So there's some similarities there that for me is probably the best part.
Yeah, I enjoy all things circular. Joe Abercrombie gets a lot of flack for circular character arcs. I always argue that they may arrive back into a similar situation, but they are not the same character that they once were. They just still have flaws. I think that's pretty consistent with some people's experience in life. Like, I don't think that that's not true to human nature. And I also really like intended repetition. Beginning books the same or ending the books the same. It's one of the things I really liked about Book of the New Sun. And then in turn, I also really enjoy about Sun Eater is, that's something he kind of took from Book of the New Sun and put it in his stuff.
The framing narrative. Yeah.
And it's still always resonates with me. Dear reader, if you choose not to continue on, I understand. And it's like, you know what? It's like the theme song playing at the beginning of a show,
Right.
It has this, okay, I know where I am. I know what I'm doing. It's a familiarity, and you feel like you've earned it because you've read,
Yeah, and it's a bit of a breaking of the fourth wall as well that we don't get in a whole lot of books, where he's talking to us directly as an audience.
Yeah.
And that is super cool. And yeah, I loved Book of the New Sun. How we ended it. Hey, if this is as far as you want to go, good on you, and see you later. But we're moving on to the next page from the page. And Stephen King does that at the end of the Dark Tower as well.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, he gives you a lot of ultimatums in the Dark Tower.
Yeah. Stop. If stop now, just stop, put the book down and consider this ending and don't turn the page. So
yeah. I mean, you could stop the last book wherever you want, technically, right? You kind of do whatever you want, which is one of the things that I absolutely love about that series. I think that's a series that has a ton of flaws as well, but
absolutely,
man, just an absolute banger for the series. And again, nothing like it. There's never going to be anything like it.
It's so unique. I mean, there is
a preposterous series. It shouldn't exist.
And
because of that, a lot of it at times kind of sucks, but it sucks in its own way. So I like it.
It's a Dark Tower suck.
Yeah, that's right. It also feels like Stevie just showing you how confused he is. Like he's so lost at times.
Yeah.
Is he on coke? Is he not on coke? Who
knows?
knows?
When the author starts putting himself in the book, I mean, it's like, okay.
Oh man.
Yeah. Talk about breaking the fourth wall. I think there you really go.
He went the extra mile.
Here's the deal. If The Winds of Winter comes out and the next king is, King George R.R. Martin, and he sits the Iron Throne, right?
Now, Robert Jordan's in A Song of Ice and Fire, which is neat.
Is he?
Yes, he is a featured character in A Song of Ice and Fire, as well as many of other little Easter eggs, like Sesame Street is featured in the Tully lineage. Oh, dude, there's so many little Easter eggs.
Oh my
gosh.
I
mean, George loved Robert Jordan.
Very cool.
He really did. It's always odd to see those fandoms at war with one another. I've never really understood it.
Right.
I think Erickson said it pretty well whenever he had a magazine interview. And he was talking about how there was, back in the day, there was a huge war between the Malazan forums and the Song of Ice and Fire forums. This is back before any of all this.
Right.
We're talking like maybe 2009, 2010, maybe even earlier. But Erickson said, I've met George. We talked about it. We both thought it was kind of silly. But at the end of the day, with these really high effort fantasy series, you kind of get dedicated to one. You learn all about it. And you almost have to take pride in that, I think. And maybe not everyone has the bandwidth or the want or desire to go learn about a whole other thing, right? And they're saying, look how much time I've spent in this world. Why would you want to go why would you want to go to Malaz? Why would you want to go to Camelin or whatever else?
Right.
I think that makes sense, but like, I don't know. I've always
I think that makes sense in the regard that both of those worlds are so complex. When you get now that would be willing to call the SWAT team for. But when you get into the older fandoms of like Star Trek versus Star Wars, that to me seemed a little sillier than the depth of learning about Malazan and learning about, like you said, all these Easter eggs in George's writing that you may not really want to have to go back and start over, on day one in a new fandom.
Yeah. And it also, fandoms come with all their own problems and troubles and positives. And they can be intimidating for sure. The worst fandom is always the one you disagree with the most. I see people, oh no, the Malazan fans. No, the Wheelies are the worst. No, the One Piece is the worst. It's like, well, whichever one's the loudest and whichever one you disagree with the most generally is the one that's going to be worse for you. I had a great experience with the Malazan fandom on the most part, but I also love the series. So
they're probably going to like you a little bit better.
Yeah, and I'll be honest, I've actually had a pretty good time with the Wheelies as well. A lot of people crap on Wheel of Time fans, but I've been very fortunate to know very level-headed people who are willing to talk to me about the series and hear me out, even whenever they have disagreements with me about my opinions on it. They've always been fairly respectable, but I also don't talk about it a lot on the internet, which helps.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely. I mean, I just think that when we're talking about these big fandoms, everybody's coming at this same material with different life backgrounds. And Brian's going to read this different than Jimmy is. And even 10 years ago, Brian is going to read it different than current present day Brian. And 10 years from now, if I'm not rotting in a squat prison because of Jimmy Nuts, I'll probably read it different then too. So
Well, I speak for everyone when I say we all hope you are in prison.
should it be a Turkish prison?
Oh, you're going to the gulag.
I'm going to Siberia.
Yeah, it's gonna be
I
bad.
mean, my background is Russian, so I mean, if you're going to send me anywhere, probably Siberia would probably be. I mean, I'm in Minnesota.
I was saying you
not
would
gonna-
make it.
Yeah, it's not going to get that much colder in Siberia. I just go to northern Minnesota. It's the same difference.
Might be a little dicey to
Yeah.
visit right now. I don't know if I would recommend that.
Okay, world, I'm looking right at the camera. I have no intention or desire to ever be in Siberia, let alone a prison anywhere. State that for the record. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. It's the one time I looked into the camera the entire night so far.
I mean, as long as you don't, you know,
To
whistle
clarify-
blow Boeing, you'll be fine.
Yeah, to exactly. No, I have no evidence against Boeing whatsoever. I've never picked up an airplane bolt in my life, nor seen a blueprint or a diagram.
No,
Nothing.
they've been picking up the wrong ones over there.
Yes,
apparently,
I
which
read about dragons and spaceships.
is- Leave me alone.
Yes.
Well, the big fandoms we know you like Wheel of Time, Dark Tower, all these things, but there's one thing that I've seen you talk about multiple times, and I have no idea what it is. So I need you to tell me about it. I need you to pitch it to me because I always leave Chatting with Nuts ordering books. And this one is Sandman Slim. What is this? I've never heard of it.
I'm getting you to read Sandman Slim.
All right, what is it?
So Sandman Slim is going to fall into the urban fantasy category. It takes place in modern day Los Angeles. And here is the premise. We have this man named James Stark, who 11 years ago, and magic is real in the world. Okay. And 11 years ago, him and his friends were doing a ritual circle that they thought they were doing some cool magic with. What he didn't realize is that his friends were working up a spell to send him directly into hell. Real hell. And he didn't find out until it's too late.
That's
and
next level swatting.
And that is next level swatting. That's when you're going to hell. Yeah. So on page one of the book, we find our main character, James Stark, on fire in a garbage bin in Los Angeles. That's the book. In Los Angeles, he has just escaped from 11 years in hell, where he was not only a gladiator in hell's arena, but he was also eventually worked his way up to, and we find out about this in the series, he was actually the devil's, Lucifer's personal hitman. And he has been the only person in the history of hell to escape. And why did he escape? To get revenge on the people that sent him there in the first place. And that is the premise of book one. It's a revenge story of a guy who gets sent to hell, learns everything there is about Hellion magic, and comes back for the magicians that put him there in the first place.
All right, I'm sold. One, I love a good revenge tale, and this all sounds super duper interesting. I love this book cover.
Yeah.
I love the rated R thing down in the bottom right.
Yeah.
I love the shadow. It just looks like an old movie poster.
Every one of his books does that. Every single book, it's a 10 or 12 book series, but they're relatively short, that you will fly through these. That's one of the things I love most about urban fantasy is that you will fly through these books. The magic is super cool, but it's not like, technical magic system. He'll talk about barking out some hoodoo, and that's the spell. Okay. It's not talking about,
moving on. We're moving on.
Yeah. I didn't drink 3 vials of silver and then, had a fart gold, and then all of a sudden I'm flying. There's none of that. I barked some Hellion hoodoo at this guy and he went on fire, and that's it. But this guy is an anti-hero. So if you like anti-heroes, Stark, and they call him Sandman Slim. He is the monster who kills monsters. That is his tag.
And also this is endorsed by William Gibson, and it says addictively satisfying, deeply amusing, dirty ass masterpiece. That's from William Gibson. I mean,
right. Yeah. And Richard Cadre is pretty active on social media as well. And him and I have had some great interactions. He's also a phenomenal photographer, and I will send you on Discord a photo that I took of the basement of my nightclub, which looks like the worst horror movie you've ever seen. And Richard took that photo and he said, "Do you mind if I touch it up a little bit and add some little shadowing here and there digitally?" And I said, "Absolutely. You're one of my favorite authors." And so he does this, he sends it back to me, and oh my God, did he? I mean, he took an already scary looking facility and turned it into, yeah, there's a lot of murder and going on down here. But the dude is really cool. His writing is exactly what you want in a anti-hero B movie revenge story that gets bigger and bigger and bigger. I think you're going to like it a lot.
This sounds good. And like you said, it's only 400 pages. Now I am going to throw a little wrench in here. That's 12 book series.
Yeah, but it reads fast. Yeah, I'm not kidding you. There's no density to it.
And it's good from book one. That would be a rarity. Okay.
Yeah, it's good from book one. And
it's
you know what?
Dresden, where I got to read 25 books and then it gets good, right?
If you read book one and you don't like it, that's all you need to read. Because it's not going to change so noticeably between, a lot of different events happen. The world gets much bigger, the cast gets bigger. But yeah, I mean, when you're talking about angels and devils and the devil himself and Lucifer's in the book, and they have a prior relationship because he worked for them. It's an intense read, but it's really good. And he doesn't shy away from stuff. He will talk about him getting absolutely hammered drunk. He will talk about smoking his packs of malediction cigarettes and how he's pissed that, on Earth, he can't get the same brand of cigarettes that he's used to smoking in hell. So yeah, there's some cool stuff in there.
That is pretty cool. I am definitely going to be, I already bought it. It'll be here tomorrow.
Well, you have to tell me what you think. And one of the things that I've talked about is that he doesn't put chapters in his books. It's one long book. That's it. There's
the Terry Pratchett approach.
Yeah. So, but there's natural breaks where you'll put the book down. You'll go, okay, I can stop here. But I had never read a book like that before I picked up the first Sandman Slim book, because I was like reading till, okay, well, yeah, exactly. I was reading and I was like, okay, I'll just, I'll put the book down at the next chapter. And like an hour and a half later, I'm reading and I realized there haven't been any chapters.
Chapters are such a strange thing. I mean, I know people who literally won't read Terry Pratchett because he doesn't have chapters. It's a psychological, and it goes into the whole pacing conversation. Mm-hmm. I think what broke me of that was reading Realm of the Elderlings and Malazan in the same year, and those chapters being so astronomically long.
Huge.
And I was like, when I'm done and I'm tired, I just stop.
Yeah.
I'll stop without a break in the page. Like I'll just stop. And it does not bother me at all anymore. Kelsey really struggles with longer chapters, and she's reading Realm of the Elderlings. She loves it. But she's like, God, I wish these chapters were shorter. And I'm like, you don't have to read it all. She's like, no, I have to finish this chapter. I'm like, you don't. I promise it's okay. Like,
isn't that amazing how the brain works though? Because there's no rules. There's no reading rules that say you can only put the bookmark in once you hit the end of the chapter. There's no unwritten rule of that either. It's something that our own internal mind has somehow generated, and it's a common thing across almost every reader.
It's a uniformed experience almost.
Yeah.
And the outliers are people who don't do that.
Right.
And
you are most definitely an outlier in many ways, my friend, including being able to stop in the middle of a chapter.
Oh, I do it all the time. I've done it in Cloud Atlas multiple times, because especially when you're reading a lot of books at once, sometimes you're just done. Like you're just like, okay, I am done with this book. I really want to get to this and read some pages in this. Let me ask you this. Have you read a book with really short chapters and you read like 15 pages and it's like 5 chapters and then you're like, I'm done for the day? And you actually read less because you feel like you've got a lot done?
It kind of, there is a sense of accomplishment when you read. I'm trying to think who does that. Does John Gwynn do that? I think John Gwynn does that a little bit. His
chapters are fairly shorter.
Yeah, like
Glenn Cook is guilty of this. Glenn Cook will write a 1-page chapter multiple times in a book, which is fine.
Sure.
But it's weird. It almost makes the book feel longer to me.
Yeah, I would say, I read, 16 chapters today. Well, how many pages is that? 22.
And then I'm always like, dang, I am going to take forever to get through this 300-page
right. Or you look at, God forbid you look at the table of contents and there's 180 chapters, right?
Yeah. I do like, this is something I really enjoyed about Erickson is like, I really like whenever they have a consistent number of chapters in a series. Like a book has this many parts or this many chapters. Always a really big fan of that because you kind of get into like a rhythm with
Sure.
it. And it helps, I think, with some of the longer series. Shauna says she just borrowed Sandman Slim from a local library.
Awesome. I like I said, it's not for everybody, but the good news is that it only takes a book to know if it's for you or not. So in the big scheme of things, it's super cool, I think.
It sounds really interesting. And it was one of the things I definitely wanted to ask you about tonight, because I always like getting people's perspectives on series that aren't so popular.
Mhm.
And as someone like you, you've been reading a long time. When did you start reading fantasy and sci-fi?
I was about 7 or 8, probably. Actually, no, piano was 7. I want to say I was reading around 9 or 10-ish fantasy, and it was like Piers Anthony stuff and The Hobbit, and yeah, probably 9 or 10 years old.
So was it straight to fantasy and sci-fi, or did you also read
Straight to fantasy? I was absolutely drawn in by anything with. I have an ex-girlfriend that once said, if the show or the book does not involve wizards, Brian is not going to be interested. And she's somewhat right in that regard.
I remember just being attracted to reading in general because it felt like something to do other than like what I was supposed to be doing, like at first.
Cool.
I think that's what kind of, and plus I also came to reading late as a child. Like I really struggled. So
Okay.
once I unlocked reading, it was like, oh, I can do this all the time. Like,
Awesome.
Cool.
I was on the other end of that. I was reading way early, and me saying 9 or 10 is probably much longer than it was because my grandfather died when I was 7, and he used to bring me crates of books to read.
Right.
So I'm thinking, yeah, it's probably closer to 5 or 6, something like that. So,
yeah,
but certainly not fantasy books by then, but yeah, I loved it so much, and I would go to my local bookstore. B. Dalton was the name of the retailer that we had up here, and I would head right over for the fantasy section, and hope there was something that I hadn't read yet, and it was just like the greatest thing in the world.
Yeah, man. Yeah, I mean, it opens up all different types of worlds. I like Tolkien's quote about it, and like he talks about escapism. And he's like, why wouldn't you want to escape prison or something along those lines? Like if you put a prisoner in a prison, they're going to try to escape. And I'm like, you know what? I kind of see what you're going for there. I get it.
I think so. And in a time in my life, when you're pre 10 years old, before the world of the internet and before of, kids have to grow up so much faster today than they did when I was younger. But I know before I was 10 years old, I thought that there was a real chance that magic could be real. Like there was no straight evidence to me that it wasn't. And if these books are talking about people that can cast spells and travel to these magical lands, I legitimately thought this might not be totally fiction. Maybe there's stuff I don't know. So I don't know. I just got so drawn into it. The love of it, it's never left me. Through all the years of being an entrepreneur and the ups and downs that go along with that, it's been a consistent thing in my life that and piano has really been my, personal, I think, mental health stabilizer. When you choose an entrepreneurial life, it's good to have some things that are, stable forces for you, because entrepreneurial life is certainly anything but stable.
Yeah, and then that act of reading actually then becomes the magic in the real world in some ways, right? In a bit of a meta cheesy way, I think. But it's true.
It is.
Yeah.
It is. I mean, I compared today's video, I compared the slog on a meta level to saying, look, we are going through the crap like the adventurers are going through the crap of 3 or 4 books, and it shouldn't be all sunshine and roses. And as readers, if you look at it as a meta, I actually listed the slog as a pro for reading The Wheel of Time, where almost everyone universal will tell you the one bad thing about it is the slog. I think it's one of the best things about it. So, but I'm just weird, I guess. I don't know. I thought magic was real for large period of my life when I wasn't being swatted. So yeah. Shit.
But you know what is magic? This flask. No, I'm just kidding.
But you know what is magic? This product that Jimmy has been asked to never sell again, right?
Yeah. Gavin Regional said, I just suffered through the 222-page chapter in last Wheel Time book, but you know what? It felt like an accomplishment when I finished a chapter. And for those who do not know, Gavin just did a reading vlog posted. You can go check it out. He read the first and last book of Wheel Time.
Really?
Yeah, that's it. That's all I did. He did the first and the last.
Oh my God.
I love Gavin's reading vlogs. They're so entertaining.
I mean, the Wheel of Time fandom won't like that, but in some regard, I kind of do. That's something if it was anything besides reading, I would do that. Like, I think I take reading too seriously to do something like that. But wow, that's awesome. I love people that do just crazy stuff like that.
I would expect it's the internet, so some people are going to be upset, but I think it'll be a resounding positive because Gavin is just one of those people who can deliver that and do it and make it work, dude. Like Gavin is like an infectious person when you watch him.
Awesome.
I some of the stuff that Gavin reads, I have no interest in reading, but I just love hearing him talk about it. So.
Well, there's a certain entertainment that comes along with creating content and vlogs. So ended up loving the Wheel of Time.
He ended up loving Wheel of Time, and it all worked out.
I cannot believe Gavin read that 2-book series.
Yeah,
it's an amazing duology. Yeah,
I have no idea.
I'm telling you, the Wheel of Time is the best duology he's ever read. So.
Meowcat says Gavin is awesome. Needs to be the next CWN guest. Gavin, I would love to have you on. You're definitely on my short list. I'm also getting hopefully a UFC signed fighter actually
awesome.
who loves reading.
Very cool.
That will be hopefully happening in the near future. But
well, you certainly have a standing invitation to come on For Whom the Bell Tolls anytime you like.
Hey man, I'll tell you what, when my schedule clears up, I'd be more than happy to come and see what the Bell has in store for me, as long as it's disco-fied.
I mean, that is a for sure thing. You will be disco-fied in volume 2, but even if your schedule doesn't free up, what I would do is cancel all of your other commitments and then come on the program. I mean, that to me seems like the smartest thing that you could do for your personal and professional life is to just,
Listen, I don't want another shutdown pandemic thing because of all the death, but like, I also wouldn't mind if things slowed down again a little bit. I wouldn't find that. It wouldn't be the worst.
I'm not opposed to that at all. I mean, to me, it was a period where I could take a deep breath for the first time in at least 15 years and not have to think about, are there people coming to the nightclub this weekend? When is the rent due? I'm in Minnesota. Is it going to snow 3 feet of snow Friday night and all of my work is going to nothing? I mean, it was such just a needed mental break for me that I can appreciate. I can appreciate the desire to be able to take a time out for more than, an afternoon or more than a weekend to really regroup and, kind of plan our humanity a little bit.
Yeah. I mean, obviously super big downsides to the entire event, which is awful, but that was the silver lining as well for me, was like a time to actually pause, and trying to figure out how to do that again, without all the
death.
With all the bad.
Right.
But if it wasn't for that, we probably wouldn't be sitting here talking tonight, dude. So
I'd be honestly Friday night. I'd be having a Latin night downtown Minneapolis tonight. So yeah, I'm very glad for the break. There's no doubt. Yeah, and to be able to do this and meet people of like interests and people that, like I said, there's people that you meet that instantly that you could be pals with. And when Matt had yourself and me and Alan on his show, I was like, I could absolutely be pals with both these guys. They seem like real dudes. They know each other. Obviously I'm this new guy that Matt has kindly thrown me into this mix. But it was interesting because when I talked to Matt he said, I want to come on my show. And Jimmy Nuts is going to be on it, and Alan from the Library of Alexandria is going to be on it. And they know each other really well, but I need a third guest besides myself, and I need somebody who's not going to get totally steamrolled by those guys and be able to hang in the ring with them. I said, I'm your guy. Don't worry about it. We'll be good.
Me and Alan have become a package deal. We
Yeah,
got invited on actually a WoW Classic podcast where they just went on to talk about Final Fantasy, like for a random episode. And I'll just never forget, like they were so gracious, great show and great host. And Alan just comes in hot, mad, and if you have never met Alan, you
sure.
don't you think he's mad at you, right?
Right.
And he's like, I haven't even got to eat yet, and I got to do this stupid show. And and I'm just sitting there like translating for him. I'm like,
Mhm.
he's a little stressed out right now, but he's
Sure.
very excited to be here. We've become a package deal.
I love it. You're
Yeah.
you're the agent slash manager.
Which is funny because if I ever did another stint back in wrestling, which I will never do, I would love for Alan to be my manager. He would be a fantastic Jimmy
I
Hart.
think I think he would be. It was really one of my things that I wanted to do when I was a kid. Was I was never going to be a professional wrestler. I'm not tall enough. I don't have the just the genetic structure for it, but I could talk. And there was no doubt I could be a manager if I really wanted to be. And the AWA, which was,
Mhm.
Nick Bockwinkel and Vern Gagne,
Kanye, yeah.
Kurt Hennig. And I went to school. I grew up with Mike Rude, who's Rick Rude's little brother.
Yeah.
And all of these guys basically lived a mile from where I live right now. And they used to film all the AWA about 10 blocks from my house. So, we'll have to talk again about some of that stuff. So that's great.
I love the AWA. I've watched a ton of it, and Vern Gagne was a real tough guy.
Yeah.
A real man's man.
Yeah. Well, I submit to this day. I asked Mike was on my channel the other night, and I had asked him who's on his Mount Rushmore of professional wrestlers, and he gave what I would consider to be probably appropriate answers, but I threw in also, I think Bobby Heenan needs to be up there because that guy could draw heat like nobody's business. He could do it all. He could wrestle, he could manage, he could commentate, he could do all of it. And the guy was on the road like everybody else was, million nights a year. Yeah. And I was just a big Bobby Heenan fan.
I love Bobby the Brain. And,
yeah.
He's always been one of my, if not my favorite commentator. Actually.
Yeah.
He got the business like few others ever do.
Few. I mean, he started like selling tickets in his local arena to the wrestling matches. I mean, from the point of being a child all the way up until his passing, he was involved in some level of wrestling, and just a huge Bobby Heenan fan.
Yeah, I have a lot of appreciation for many people that no one actually cares about, because once you're on the other side of the business, the way you look at it's very different.
Mm-hmm.
Like I mentioned Johnny Saint all the time, and people are like, "What?
Right?
What are you talking about?" And I'm like, "The World of Sport, UK." Like that was the jam for me. Alan's here. He said, "I won't take this Mean Gene erasure."
So I got a funny story. So again, Gene Okerlund's from here too. And my dad happened to be a phenomenal golfer. And I think my dad was in the group behind Gene Okerlund and sent up a towel to Gene saying, "Please put this on your head because the sun is shining off of it so much. I can't see the ball when I'm hitting it."
Oh, that is incredible.
Yeah.
I feel like Alan, you would be Jim Cornette because you're loud and angry at times. I think that
would we put the tennis racket in Alan's hands and let him go at it? I think why not?
Yeah, I think he could handle it.
Although he might like that megaphone too from Jimmy Hart. So
yeah, and Jim Cornette also broke his legs, just like Alan did when he got hit by a car. So.
Oh my gosh, there you go. They have that in common.
Oh, that is absolutely terrific. There's one question before I let you go. I know
Sure.
It's a little bit late here on the Friday night, but Red by Kyle says, what would Jimmy's book have been if he had given Brian a book for his DNF challenge? So the problem with this is if I say a book I've DNF, people are going to think I hate the book. But there's books that I've started and I just haven't got back to, or maybe it just rubbed me the wrong way at the time. The book I think I would pick for you would be the Thomas Covenant first book.
Lord Fowl's Bane?
Lord Fowl's Bane. I would pick that because I want to love it. And I actually really like Donaldson's writing. And I like the first, a lot of people don't like the first 20%. I actually like the first 20%. I didn't like what came after. It just kind of slogged for me. So that would be my pick. Have you ever read it?
I have not. And it's weird because I have a memory of being in 8th grade and somebody in either gym class or something was must have been at lunch, was sitting and reading Lord Fowl's Bane. And I remember seeing the cover, and I remember asking myself, I was probably only, 14 years old, something like that, going, I wonder who Lord Fowl is and what is his Bane? I didn't even know what a Bane was at the time.
That's
Right.
cool.
So what's a Bane? So I remember Lord Fowl's Bane. I didn't know what it was about at all. I didn't even know it was a fantasy book, but yeah, he could be Paul Bear. Exactly.
Yeah.
Maybe we'll do that one, but I am actually going to do another DNF challenge. Everyone's hearing. See, we're breaking news. That's what we do here on the Fantasy
That's
Network.
what we do.
On Chatting with Nuts, we break news. I'm going to be doing another DNF challenge, but it's probably going to be in January. I think it's going to be kind of an annual thing, so long as people keep tuning into the channel. And we will give Jimmy Nuts between March, which is his current pick of Lord Fowl's Bane, all the way up until December to either stay on that pick, or he can change that pick in for something of his choosing, and we'll give him, I don't know, say 9 months to figure it out.
I could be a real jerk and put Infinite Jest on your list if you want.
What I got, bring it on. It doesn't matter. When Philip gave me the Worm Ouroboros, and can you imagine like a book that Philip has to put down?
Yeah, that's rough.
Okay. And meanwhile, it was probably my favorite book of the month, by the way, which was
That's
just
awesome.
how weird I am. But yeah, I'm going to do it again. I'm going to include you on the list this year. I'm going to have Alan on the list this year too. And what I'm kind of thinking of is each year we bring in a new cast. So this year's cast of the DNF, I'm going to let them redeem themselves this spring, where they're going to give me a book they actually like to read. So all 7 of those booktubers will be giving me another book, and we'll start season 2 with a new cast of DNF. So you've got plenty of time to prepare.
I know if there's other ones. Like, I'm trying to think of other ones, but I have to really think about like good. I would want you to read something to maybe give me a new perspective, not one I just want you to hate read. Like that's not right. What I want to do. So I have to think about it. But Lord Fowl's Bane's definitely up there. Brent said he hated the character of Thomas Covenant, and all the other characters were the most milquetoast 2D characters I've ever read. I didn't mind Thomas until he gets in the fantasy world, and then everything just kind of went downhill for me there. And I do agree about the other characters. I hope maybe. Oh, and Titus Grown, I did dean it. Maybe that would be a good one, because I do think there's a lot of redeeming qualities about it. I'll think about it. You
think about, well, yeah, like I said, you have until December to get back to me on this one. So assuming I haven't been either kicked off YouTube, swatted into prison, or wound up somewhere in Siberia, we've got time.
Well, if I have my way, you'll be in Siberia in a prison camp. Brian, thanks for coming on, man. Thanks for sharing your Friday night with me. I was excited to do this. You were a fabulous guest. I just genuinely appreciate how enthusiastic you are about books. Zero bitterness out of you, and I think that's fantastic, man.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me on here. It helps, other people find my channel, and I hope that they like what they see, because we're all trying to learn something and get better every day. So I really do appreciate the opportunity to come on and chat with you. This is, like I said, I watch all your episodes. I love them. So it's something special for me to be on the show.
Hell yeah, man. We'll do it again for sure. We'll bring you back on. And I know that you're going to be reading Earth of the New Sun. And I also,
yes, we'll do it when it works out for both of us. Let's just plan that. So let's not like put it on on any timetable. Let's just make a commitment that when it works out for both of us, that's when we'll read it.
We'll make it happen.
Yeah.
And I also read those books very slowly. I read Book of the New Sun over like 6 months.
I read fast. I read kind of fast, but it doesn't matter. Well, at least if we're starting it, together, we know that we're not going to DNF it, right? I mean, there's no way we're going to DNF Earth and the New Sun.
No.
Right. So so even if I finish it first, I know you'll get there either way.
Alice and Jimmy, we're to buddy read as we speak. What are we buddy reading? I actually genuinely don't remember what we're buddy reading.
I think Alan is basically telling me to beware of buddy reading with Jimmy because he may forget.
That might be it. Also, he wants to know if you've watched all 11 Alan episodes.
Are you
That's
kidding
only
me?
33 hours.
What Alan doesn't know is that I've commissioned a gigantic Alan mural to be painted in not only the ceiling of my living room where I film BellTube, but it sprawls out into over my piano area. There's a hot tub room in this house. Alan's left leg is actually going to be painted on the ceiling in the hot tub room. This whole house is becoming a shrine to the Alan of Alexandria. He approves this.
He loves it.
And you know what? I'm changing my address. I'm changing my address to
Walker Way.
nope. It's going to be called One Delight Avenue. Because it is a delight. It's a delight to come down One Delight Avenue.
Sub to BellTube.
Right? Exactly.
Oh my goodness. I love it. I love it. I love it.
Very
Yes.
cool.
Do go sub to BellTube. I have him tagged in the community post. I should have put your channel in the description below, but sometimes I do forget. So I'll check that right after we go offline.
Yeah, that would be a cool thing to do. I would appreciate it.
Yeah, that would
very
be
much.
someone would say that'd be polite.
Yeah, yeah, all right. It's cool.
I will
By the way,
definitely-
I will send you the invoice for my time, and
Oh,
just let me
okay.
know. Let me know the best address. Is it? Do I send that to One Delight Way as well? I think I probably do.
Oh, just let me return this flask I bought. Let me
Yeah,
just-
exactly.
One
Sandman
star.
Slim. He just flushed down Sandman Slim, and he just basically just thumbs down every video I just made. Brian, your ratio is too good, Brian. I'm gonna go thumbs down everything.
I will be sending my hordes of people after you for sure.
Oh my God, the Jimmy maniacs.
Yes, the nutcases, if you will.
Oh, very good.
Folks, thank you for joining us tonight and being the third guest as always. I can't say how much I appreciate the fact that people still tune into these shows and seem to enjoy them. And do please go subscribe to BellTube. He reads a lot of different stuff. He's also extremely enthusiastic and well spoken, and production value is excellent as well. So, Brian, thanks again. I appreciate you, man.
Thank you for having me, and thanks to the chat for being so welcoming to me as well.
Absolutely, man. We do well, and we travel well too. That's one thing I love about my audience. We do travel very, very well. And folks, thank you for being here. I do appreciate it. If you like this, you can hit like. It helps spread the word and people see it more, I think. I don't know. If you hated it, you can dislike it. That's always an option. But there's a Patreon description. It's optional, but always appreciate it. Until we see you next time, be good, be safe, and remember to always keep turning the page.